recording.
And we're live. You're listening to the Verhoeven Effect podcast. I'm Conlon.
And I'm Nathan.
We have another very special episode. We have the 1980 movies Blues Brothers. First came out June 20th, 1980. Nathan, did you see this movie in theaters?
I did not. I did not see this in theaters when I was 6 years old.
Guess that would not be a child movie.
Yeah, probably not. This is pretty like a hard R movie just for the language alone.
I actually don't know what it was rated. It didn't.
Oh, it was rated R.
It's R. Yeah, it's R. So yeah. Directed.
Oh, no, go ahead.
No,
I said I didn't watch this movie until years. I mean, this is something I've seen like 500 times.
Yeah,
it's kind of like Time Bandits. Like, it was always playing in the background. But I never really like paid attention to it until I was older.
Yeah, I was kind of surprised how long it is, but it actually I don't know, the weird thing about this movie I think is like it's almost barely a comedy, but that's how it's remembered. It's like it's a comedy, but it's kind of like just this weird musical action movie.
Yeah. Yeah, I didn't think it was like, yeah, it's a version I watched was over 2.5 hours, but I watched like because I had it on
unrated version or something.
Yeah, and then but they had like for renting, they had like with all the deleted scenes. Like, well, I'll just watch the whole thing, which was like, yeah, it was fine.
I just watched the regular version on Amazon. They had the unrated for rent, but I just watched the regular one because
that's what I watched, the unrated version that just had like extra scenes. That was it.
Oh, okay. Directed by John Landis, who famous for lots of things. I don't know, almost probably most famous. Well, I mean, National Lampoon. He directed that. That was a huge movie. That also had John Belushi. And then also like Michael Jackson's Thriller. That was a huge, like one of the first huge music videos. Till this day, still influential. And also, we talked about last week. He was also infamous for, basically getting 3 people killed in a helicopter accident on the Twilight Zone.
Yeah, John Landis likes stunts. As you know, Blues Brothers, a lot of dangerous stunts in it, and it's like they also did an American Werewolf in London.
Yeah,
which is like that's remembered as
it's like a comedy / horror movie.
Yeah, it's a cool movie with like a weird twist, but or just kind of a strange story structure and things that are going on in it. But it's kind of
it's also like one of the first movies to have like the transformative like inflatable bladder things. Like they use that also in like The Thing and stuff like that to make very like violent, realistic looking horror things. It's like that and Videodrome. That was the 3 movies that started using that stuff. The latex inflatable bladder.
Yeah, when I think of John Landis, I think of Animal House, The Blues Brothers, American Werewolf in London, and like Coming to America was another big one. Trading Places. And then after that, I think his career died after Coming to America.
Yeah.
I mean, he did other things, but they weren't like...
Yeah, I can't remember if he became more of a producer or what. He's also like, I don't know, this is just rumors. But as far as the rumor mill is concerned, the latest update in the rumor mills is that John Landis is just a complete asshole. And people don't like him. Huh. And his son got in trouble for sexually harassing people, so he was in Hollywood for a hot minute and now isn't. So he wrote like that. He wrote like that Blight movie, that Netflix kind of like Will Smith magical action cop movie.
Bright?
Yeah, Bright, yeah.
Oh, okay, yeah, the one where it was like Shadowrun was real.
Yeah.
Okay.
Also the fun thing about Max Landis is that he was like a friend of the show to like the Red Letter Media guys, and not anymore.
Just because the Sex Pest stuff? Or?
Yeah. Cinematography is done by Stephen M. Katz, who's like mostly just done cinematography for comedies, which is kind of weird because like this is a well shot movie that's has tons of action, and then he just went on to do kind of traditional comedies.
Okay.
Because this is like almost shot like, in some ways, this is almost shot like a Blade Runner, but just less, less scientific.
Yeah, I mean, the opening of this made me. I forgot, like, the opening of this was shot. I think it was mostly shot in Gary, Indiana,
Oh yeah,
where they had like this industrial city and just like, the off burning of gases from this tower. And I was waiting to see like Los Angeles 2019. Like, I forgot the intro to this movie was just this bleak industrial hellscape. Chicago was, at that
Yeah.
time too.
I mean, this movie comes out in the 1980s. This is very much like a late 70s movie.
It's a 70s movie.
Yeah. Written by Dan Aykroyd and John Landis. Of course,
I like Dan Aykroyd's original 500-page script treatment for this. That they looked over and they're like, there's some elements here we can use, Dan. But again, this is because we talked about him writing like the Ghostbusters script, and it's like, oh, it's just like a journey into like paganism and darkness. It's like, this isn't the theme we're going for, but.
Well, I mean, those two, this and that movie share like similar things where it's like, it's not a straightforward comedy. It's more subversive, and you can feel that, and that's what makes it different. Because it's not, because it's basically, it's like a serious movie that comes off as funny to the audience because of how weird it is, not necessarily because they're doing like the setup and punchline comedy bits.
Yeah.
And there's just like, just not many movies do that. So, but also I think like sort of the magic here, and it's probably John Landis being irresponsible, but the magic of this movie that movies are missing today, and it's unfortunate because it's danger, is like what makes the magic is this movie seems irresponsible. They definitely put people in danger, and that's what movie magic is a lot of times. Yep. And nowadays you either know it's CGI or think it's CGI and it's not, and you're actually not giving them credit. And it's like, there's no danger here. They just all did it in a computer. Which is, I mean, that's why that new Mission Impossible coming out, they have like a 30-minute like behind the scenes about that stunt where he jumps off a cliff to let people know, like, hey, we did this shit for real. Like, come see this movie. Like, we're putting our lives on the line.
Yeah. Basically, Tom Cruise did a PSA about, I could have died at any point in filming it. By the way, me, not some guy who looks like me. The people that insure the movie love that. But people respect him for that because he's like an insane detail guy who is like, I'm just doing my own stunts. And it's like, and when we say doing his own stunts, we don't mean doing a pratfall. It's like jump off of something, with a thin wire to hold it up.
Hang on to a C-130 as it takes off.
Yeah. Like, no,
I mean, he's strapped into the plane and they CGI'd out the strap, but he was fucking on the side of that plane holding on.
If you had me tied up with a fire hose side strap and said nothing can happen, Nathan, I still wouldn't do it.
Of course, that cast is John Belushi, Dan Aykroyd, and Cab Calloway is the third one. Well, he's like a famous musician.
Yeah, he's like a I don't know, like some kind of.
Well, I want to say he's a blues musician, but they have a part where he sings, and he's more like kind of like a what do you call that? What was that, like kind of like song and dance stuff they did like in the 40s and stuff.
It's kind of like jazz and vaudeville. It's
like
vaudeville.
Yeah,
but it's like more jazzy than just straight up vaudeville comedy.
Yeah.
It's kind of one of those like, I'm gonna talk to the crowd, we're gonna do call and repeat stuff, that's, and then it was like that scat stuff where it's like that, all that kind of stuff.
It's interesting that he gets third billing, but so we have Act 1. All right, a dirty and dark city is blowing smokestacks and flames, and this is what we just talked about, where it's basically, it's like, oh, this is Blade Runner. This is like the this is like the plate footage of the effect shot for Blade Runner before they put the effects in.
Yeah, this is pretty much the same scene. It's like the Bluesmobile doesn't fly by or anything. Yeah. But they actually could have played the bleak, weird music in the beginning of Blade Runner. It would have worked for this too.
Yeah, because it's just presented without any context. You just see.
No,
this
I don't think there's any sound for the first 6 minutes of the movie.
No, you just that flame kind of
hellhole. Yeah,
yeah, and that's it. And then we fade to some like dog statues, and we pan up to a prison. While they're putting an American flag up, and an Illinois flag, so it's like, okay, we're in Illinois. It's the Joliet Correctional Center.
Yeah, we're actually in a place in Illinois we've been to a lot, not the correctional facility, but the city of Joliet. So it's like, oh, okay.
We used to visit our grandparents there, and I always thought like Joliet's like, oh, this is kind of a ritzy place, and I didn't know there was a prison there, so I don't know what to think of Joliet.
Well, Joliet was a federal prison. It's closed now.
Oh, okay.
So the federal prisons are nice. They're not like the state ones. The federal ones are like, oh, unlimited budgets. But the federal ones that weren't like supermaxes or some kind of weird holding stations for the people we imprison around the world, those have all pretty much closed. This one was closed in 2002, so
okay,
it doesn't exist.
So you meet Joliet Jake, Jim Belushi. He was also just Jake Blues, one of the Blues brothers, but in the listing he's Joliet Jake because he went to jail. So he's a prisoner being led away by guards. Jake is being released and they're giving him his belongings back. He has a tattoo on his left hand that just says Jake, and the box says Jake Blues. Then we cut to Elwood, who's Dan Aykroyd, and he has Elwood written on his knuckles, so that's a thing for them. Also, like Belushi has like some weird, I don't know, like mysticism symbol like on like the inside of his thumb or something like that. I don't know what that is, but just fun character stuff.
Yeah, they're rough people.
Yeah. Elwood pulls up in a used police car.
The Bluesmobile. Very important part of the movie.
It's the heart of the
1974 Dodge Monaco.
There's also a funny bit where like he goes to sign in, or he walks up right up to the counter to get his stuff, and then like the guy behind the counter, I think it's Frank Oz, who's famous for Yoda and stuff like that. He directed some movies too, but he kind of motions the guard to pull him back, so they pull him back out of the way so he's not close, and he has to like stand behind this line that's like 4 feet away, and so he just like comically leans from the line to the table to sign in his name to get his belongings back.
I think they took that from Clockwork Orange. Alex DeLarge has to do that in the prison where the guy shouts like a drill instructor all the time.
Okay.
So yeah, he was like, because he just leans on the desk to sign something, and the guy yells at him. It's like, do you see the yellow line? Your feet belong on the other side of it. He just ratchets his voice up and down. So yeah, I always like, oh, this is from Clockwork Orange. Maybe it wasn't. Kind
of. Steal from the best. Why not? Even comedy.
Yeah. I mean, if you're gonna steal from someone, aim for the king. Don't go around.
Jake gets let out at sunrise. It's like the tunnel is like glowing as he comes out. It's a very good shot. They obviously just
it's an amazing shot. It's like, is he walking out of the suitcase and Repo Man and Pulp Fiction? Yeah. Like Jake's just walking out of the suitcase and no one's turning into a
we get credits and it's Jake and Elwood. They cut to it's like dun dun and it's does it say Dan Aykroyd or does it say like Jake Blues? I can't remember if it says their character name or their actor name. I can't remember. Anyway, so it cuts back to them and it seems like, there's some strife here, and then they hug, but like basically without emotions whatsoever. They just like embrace. It's like, okay, and then move on.
Yeah.
Which that's kind of like,
I thought Dan Aykroyd was autistic before I paid attention to the movie. I was like, oh, okay, I see what he's.
Well, I mean, here he's supposed to be like the ultimate straight man, where he just like he literally eats like plain toast. Like that's what he likes to eat, and he has no emotions, and things are just delivered without any irony. um, and it's, yeah, they have the trademark black Blues Brothers suits, which is just like black suit and tie. They got a black kind of, what do you call it, a bowler hat, or what the hell kind of hat is that? And then sunglasses. So very.
They're doing like skinny ties, which are very like 50s.
Yeah.
And and wearing the hat like that. Nobody's worn hats like that in a long
time. I mean, yeah, their whole thing is supposed to be kind of like they look cool, but they're behind the times. So.
Yeah. Well, this movie is an homage to a form. In 1980, this movie was an homage to a dying art form. And then it itself became a kind of comedy that is also now a dead art form. Like, they don't make comedies like this, anymore. They do different kinds, but they don't, you'd never see the Illinois Nazis in a modern film.
I mean, of course, this comes, of course, Jim Belushi and Dan Aykroyd are coming out of Saturday Night Live, and there's just that whole milieu and thing that's
this was when the Saturday Night Live movies were cool, kids. This was before they actually quit making them. They got so terrible. So this was like the Blues Brothers was like a musical sketch on the Saturday Night Live in the 70s. Right?
Oh, was it? Okay.
Yeah. But it was just Dan Aykroyd and John Belushi doing like a blues act, but poorly. That was kind of like the joke, and then it sort of took on a life of its own. It's like, no, this is kind of cool, and then it became this movie.
Oh shit! I wrote Jim Belushi for all this, didn't I? Well, okay. If I say Jim Belushi, I mean John Belushi. Let's directly specify.
Yes, Jim Belushi was not associated with this movie that I know of. But he did have a fine career of his own, a different career, not a comedy career. But the thing about like John Belushi is just magic in this movie, and like from Saturday Night Live and a bunch of stuff, and of course National Lampoon or Animal House, but you look at his credits, like he only was in like 13 movies, and only like 3 of them of. Yeah,
and he's just the heart of this movie. I did not go and watch Blues Brothers 2000 for this.
No, I've never seen it because I heard such bad. Because I had friends that were really into this. Like when I was growing up, like I had friends that were really into this, like to the point they liked the music and stuff. I was more like a prog rock guy, so it wasn't really like my music genre, but I did appreciate the movie for being like a cool comedy. But yeah, I knew guys that were really into it, and when Blues Brothers 2000 came out, I was like, "So did you see it or whatever?" And they're like, "Oh yeah, man, fuck this. They just ruined it all." I was like, "Oh, okay." So if serious fans were saying that, I was like, okay, I'm not going to watch it then, and I never have.
I've seen it one time on cable, and I can't remember. I only remember one scene from it. There's a part where like they need to get somewhere, and they take the Bluesmobile and they just drive it into a river, and then come out the river the other side like nothing happened, and it's just kind of funny. And that's about it.
Yeah.
And then they essentially they replace John Belushi with John Goodman, which is a good replacement, but it just doesn't work.
Different kind of actor.
Yeah. They don't say like he's like his character. He's just like a long lost brother also, or whatever. And so,
yeah. Well, the Blues Brothers like aren't really brothers. They're just orphans that force one another in the orphanage.
So like are all the orphans of that time, their just last name is all Blues or something like that, or they just choose their name?
Like if these guys change their name to that or what?
But yeah, you can see this be, I don't know, it's like people debate as to where Tarantino got like the idea for the suits for Reservoir Dogs. Some people point to this, although it's like, this is pretty much the Reservoir Dog suit just minus the hat. Other people point to a very weird indie actioner comedy called Straight to Hell.
Okay.
Which is from the guy who made Repo Man. That's one of his late 80s.
That's what he got it from, because Tarantino's referenced Repo Man like 100 times, 100 interviews I've seen. So that's where the Reservoir Dogs costume came from.
But I'm pretty sure, like, I don't know, like, This is
I mean,
probably
he's
like
probably aware of this. He's aware of every movie ever made.
yeah.
So it's.
But also, if you watch like any Japanese movie from the '60s, they also that's all they wore too. So you know.
Yeah.
Jake is complaining that the Cadillac is gone. The original Bluesmobile. Elwood sold it for a microphone, to which Jake is like, okay, I can see that. Yeah. but then he's mad. He's like, why'd you get a cop car? I don't. It's like, do you have the line they says? It's like it's got cop shocks, cop tires, cop brakes.
Got a 440 Magnum V8. It's got cop suspension, cop tires, cop motor, and then he proceeds to, or what does he call it? A cop power plant, and then he proceeds to those drawbridges that come up so that
a boat can go underneath.
Yes, and he proceeds to jump one of those to show it's, and then and also it doesn't have it's pre-catalytic converter.
Yeah,
so it can run on just regular leaded gas with because that before catalytic converters you could run really high powered engines on leaded gas because leaded gas was an anti-knock additive.
Yeah,
so that wouldn't resonate with anyone now. So then he jumps over this bridge in this suicidal run up, which in real life would destroy the car and kill them both. But it's then it lands on the other side, and then Jake's like, yeah, it does have good acceleration. That's the whole thing between these two is Jake gets really upset about things. Elwood gives a flat delivery and then does something wildly destructive or insane, and then they both kind of agree, yeah, okay, yeah, you're right about that.
Yeah.
No reflection on the fact, oh, we almost died, or people probably could have got killed. Nah, it's moving on.
When does Dukes of Hazzard come out?
Probably Dukes of Hazzard was from the 70s, I believe. Let me look that up.
79.
Okay.
Maybe. Believe so. Yeah.
Let me look it up real quick.
Keep talking. 79. So
talk amongst yourselves.
Because that was all Dukes of Hazzard was too. Was we're also jumping a Dodge.
Thing. Yeah, it aired from 79 to 85. Now I was really into that when I was a kid. Just a good old boy. I think I used to sing that song. I don't know. Mom and Dad told me about that.
Hey, the good old boys are in this movie too.
They were in a bar in Kokomo, Indiana, which was weird because that's where my wife is from. Yeah, are a bunch of hillbillies, aren't you? We watched the movie together. Indiana, that shit kicking bar. That's what they think of. That's what people from New York and Chicago think of Indiana. Just a bunch of kickers throwing beer bottles at a stage. It's actually not a wrong thing to think.
They pull into Chicago. They stop at an orphanage where apparently Jake promised to see a nun when they got out, but Jake says I was lying. Yeah. But Elwood insists that he can't lie to a nun, and so they got to go see the penguin. We got to go see the penguin. No, Elwood. Let's go. This is where it basically just turns into not The Omen. What's the one? The Exorcist?
Exorcist, yeah. There's some weird shit going on.
There's a very brutal Jesus on the cross statue hanging at an angle at the top of the stairs.
Yeah, it's completely non sequitur. It's that would never be there for any reason. Something like that would be in a cathedral of worship because it's huge. This thing's really tall, but now it's just stuck at the top of the stairway as you walk into this nun's office who runs this orphanage. And again, I think these scenes were filmed in Gary, Indiana, I believe. Just because the look was there. It's hey, we don't have to build sets.
The dirt's already here.
Yeah. So, in case anyone doesn't know about Gary, Indiana, well, look it up. And it's also Chicago adjacent, so it's actually authentic, I could say.
Yeah, it's basically just a large industrial area and full of crime. That's all it does is it produces industry and crime.
Well, the thing about Gary, Indiana, because I live near Detroit, which like people act like Detroit is the worst place in America because the auto industry and all the jobs they lost. All that is true. However, Gary, Indiana is like, they lost 90% of their jobs in like a week. It was like when American Steel collapsed, when US Steel just bottomed out. It was like, you went from guys making $70,000 a year in the 70s to no jobs, nothing. It's like not even coming close to replacing it. And so everyone left, and the people that stayed, it's basically like a demilitarized zone. Like I think the biggest thing that happened in Gary, Indiana, after the steel collapse that's where Michael Jackson and his family were from. And then they just sang and danced their hearts out to get the hell away from that place. It was literally the most depressing place I've ever seen.
Well, I can't. Is it South Bend or is it Gary where they make the Abrams tank?
I would guess that's South Bend.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, neither one of those places are like great. I think South Bend's still habitable. But yeah, that's why when people they're like, "Oh, Detroit, that must be scary." It's like, no, I can show you scary. Like Detroit actually got some cool stuff in it. I mean,
yeah, like Detroit has like history and culture.
Yeah, there's stuff there
mixed with violence and depravity. Gary is nothing but a black hole of sadness.
Yeah, no, there's nothing. Like Detroit, there's a reason to. I mean, I'll tell you this: about 25 years of living here, I've been to Detroit a bunch for different things. It's fine. If you are looking for trouble, it is right there, though. I mean, don't think that you're going to run your mouth at somebody or for a minute, like flip someone off in traffic. No, you're going to get shot at if you do that in Detroit. But if you don't do those things and you go to the museum, you go to the ball game, you go have a beer at the bar, you're going to be fine. People are going to be cool. But if you act like an asshole, it's not going to go good.
But there are
reasons to go to Detroit. No reason to go to Gary.
Yeah.
None.
Yeah, in Detroit you can get like a donut made with like Kit Kats and Reese's, and then pick up some crack around the corner. That's Detroit.
Yeah, I mean it's like if you need like EDM and whores, can be in your hands. But again, see, that's the bad thing about going to Detroit. If you're going there looking for that shit, you're going to find everything that comes with it. Yeah. But if you're just going in to take in a ball game and you pay $30 to park your car is going to be fine when you come back as long as you pay the $30. Don't pay the $30 like I'm going to park on the street. Well, good luck. Go with God on that one because I will always hand that money out the window. Yep, and there's a guy who'll sit there in a chair with a shotgun and watch all those cars, and you'll be fine. He will. You'll never have anything to worry about. Yeah, but yeah, if you go there looking for problems, it's like you don't even have to lick your thumb and put it up in the wind. The trouble will be right there. And people will randomly start beating the shit out of each other. I saw, but you know what you do when you see that happen? Like, oh, that's weird. You walk around it and wherever you're going, because it doesn't have anything to do with you. Yeah. They're just doing whatever the hell they're doing. It's like, this isn't your problem. I mean, and no one's getting stabbed or shot. They're just like wailing on each other's faces. It's like, that's fine. I mean, that's rarely fatal unless they pick up a rock or something. But even then, it's like, this isn't my fight.
So yeah, it's very starkly lit here. It's it's kind of got an Exorcist vibe. Doors just start opening and closing by themselves.
Yeah, the power of God. Remember, miracles and the power of God. Like this movie makes sense if you never lose sight of that. That's what I love about this movie. It's very well crafted, even though it seems goofy. It's like, I don't know, miracles and the crazy stuff that happens later in the movie. It's like, remember, we're on a mission from God. And we've seen God's power manifest through this crazy nun in her orphanage. So we know it's real in the context of this movie.
She tells him to sit down on these like little like desks meant for children in the back of the room. And then she's like, no, move closer. And so they comically, like, without standing up, like scoot with the like still sitting in the desk all the way up. And nobody sells it. Like nobody's like, oh, don't do that, or that's weird. It just happens.
Well, and that's the other thing I love about the I like to act like these guys do in the context of things that happen in this movie when something horrible or crazy happens. and they just kind of get up and like, wow, we got to keep going. Like, we're not even going to talk about the rest of it.
Yeah.
This is where that starts, because they're in these the wooden style desks, the tiny desks that were made for kids in like the 30s when like 12-year-old kids weighed 40 pounds. Like, these two grown men are trying to sit in those style of desks and slide them across the floor to this nun who's always shot with a camera angle way down at an up angle, so she looks like she's 10 feet tall the whole time.
And apparently the nun needs $5,000 or the city's going to close the orphanage or something. I'm like,
yes.
I forget.
Cook County properties tax has assessed $5,000 against this orphanage. And so I looked up like I tried to look up and like understand, just because I like to do weird shit like that, like how many square foot would that orphanage have to be in 1980 to have that kind of assessment of property against it, considering it's a charitable orphanage owned by the Catholic Church, not running a profit. But I couldn't specifically find, so I was assuming they were way behind on their taxes.
Yeah,
that's where this, because $5,000 is a lot of money in 1980s bucks. Really, it's a lot of money even today, but back then that's like $30,000.
Yeah. Jake insists that he'll get the money, but she doesn't want dirty money because the reason he went to jail was like small arm robbery.
Yeah.
To pay a bar tab.
Yeah, he stuck up a liquor store to pay a bar tab. Some stupid stuff like that. When they're a performing band. Like, well, yeah, we can work that bar tab off. But that comes up later in the movie.
Yeah. And then like Jake, and then she like, I think she racks his knuckles with the ruler, and then he starts swearing, and then she basically starts beating them both as they're like swearing.
Oh, and they start awful. They give stupid fucking penguin, and they're just beating them with what looks like a metal rod, you know.
Yeah, because the ruler breaks at some point, so she needs another thing to beat them with.
Yeah.
I hear she says not to come back until they redeem themselves, which is just an open-ended. Like, yeah. What does that mean? Does that mean coming back with a clean $5,000, or just coming back when they feel like they've redeemed themselves? And that's up to them to decide.
Well, I do like that she insists that it can't be dirty money, because that's like, well, that would have been, because immediately Jake's like, no problem, sister. No problem. She's like, no, I don't want any filthy crime money. He's like, oh, well, how the fuck are we gonna? You're fucked. Or she says so. That's where the hitting starts, because he basically doesn't say you're fucked, but he says something, something you wouldn't say to a nun, or shouldn't.
And then Curtis shows up, played by Cap Calloway. He's kind of like, I don't know, he's a part of the orphanage or something. I'm not exactly sure.
He lives there, and I think he mentors the children.
Yeah. Okay. So he greets them. He kind of updates them on the situation. So he's kind of like a father to them. So he taught them like blues and stuff like that. So that's why like where their musical tastes come from. Then they go to a Baptist church where James Brown is revealed as the Reverend, and it's a very lively crowd.
Oh yeah, people are like doing backflips up to the ceiling, and they hired professional dancers to come in, and they were doing like crazy dancing.
Yeah.
And we mostly
see that
down through Eddie Murphy's Raw, just imitations of but yeah. What were you gonna say?
Well, I mean, like, you always see stuff like churches like this, and like we never went to a church like that. It's like that seems fun. Like you'd want to go to church, and that's completely born out of hopelessness. It's like, wow, it's great that you can have that kind of hope out of such depravity.
Yeah, I mean that's why they have crazy church. It's like, because you've got church, you've got like ritual. Like we were exposed to two kind of churches as a kid. You've got the highly ritualistic Catholic churches, which are cool because it's like, oh, these are traditions that go back 1,000 years. What these guys are doing. And then we had like American Protestant churches, which were very dour and serious, but there was like they were saying cool stuff. But we never had like black church where it's like, oh, at the end of your horrible week, you get to have a party where Jesus is invited and we do all this cool stuff because your life has been horrible the whole week. Whereas like churches we went to, the white churches, it's like, well, dad went to work and made a lot of money, and you went to school and got to glue macaroni on something, and you did cool stuff like that. And mom didn't get taken to jail or anything. So we didn't really have to like have a party on Sunday. We were kind of like, It was dour lamentation or ancient rituals. Like that's what we saw. We didn't see anything like this.
Or have the
We really didn't need it because like we had television, we had cable TV growing up. We were rich.
Well, after church, I can't remember what it's called. What's the thing you have after church where it's like, you know, like the ham salad sandwiches and Ritz crackers and the off-brand
Fellowship?
Oreos. I can't remember what it was called. It wasn't called like brunch or something, like, I forget what the name was called. It has like a
Yeah, it did have like a weird liturgical sounding name. What you're talking about. So I've never eaten that ham salad since, but I always associate that with church and like lemonade Kool-Aid, which wasn't that. It was some like weird brand. Yeah, and then you got the Hydrox cookies.
Yes.
And you got to hang out with the kids you knew in school who we knew were terrible and said awful things along with you. And then we were all at church and well, let's be nice. Don't say the F word in front of pastor. I enjoyed church. So I liked going to church. It was cool. It was fun. It was like kind of a break from like, oh, everyone has to be nice to me here.
Well, I mean, that's what I like. You know, it's like, well, the idea of church is like all people are supposed to be good here. You get redemption and stuff like that. And then after a while, what I notice about church is like, it's essentially the greatest. What do you call that? Now I'm forgetting the name.
Denial exercise.
Maybe. What's the thing that conservatives love to call people who like want to like think they're virtue signaling? It's the greatest virtue signaling that's ever been created.
Oh well, yeah.
Where it's like awful people and businessmen that go to church to make sure to do their networking, and they just go to church because it helps their bottom line. They don't believe in God. They don't follow the teachings of Jesus whatsoever.
Yeah,
and that was like 80% of what made up your church. It's like, oh, so church doesn't make you a better person at all. It's just a way to grift people.
Yeah, there was a certain element. I mean, yeah, there was a certain element of that. I mean, for me,
I mean, there are some great Christians, but that's like 10% of people that God makes them a better person. Everybody else is just, I'm just here to pretend that like I'm gonna get into heaven if I do this. Like, it's 2 hours on Sundays. What's the problem? I don't get it.
Yeah, I thought it was cool when I was a kid. I haven't participated in organized religion in a long time. No particular reason. I'm just kind of like, well, that's not my, I like to be alone. So and that's my own activity. So it's kind of like, okay, well, I guess I'm not doing that. I also don't like sin throughout the week. So I don't know where that puts me. It's not God I have a problem with. It's his fan club. That's always been the thing. It's like me and God are cool. I mean, I don't understand him and I don't know if he understands me. He's supposed to, but I don't know. But yeah, it's some of his fan club that really makes things strange.
Yeah, I am trying to find the name of the after church brunch is called, but I put that in and it's like everybody just calling it after church brunch.
No, it had a name.
Yeah,
yeah. I thought it was like fellowship or something, but yeah.
Maybe, I don't know. It had a name it's like something that sounds vaguely Latin or something like that.
Yes, I know what you're talking about. It's right on the tip of my tongue.
Anyway, yeah, so James Brown is delivering the sermon. Sermon turns into a song and dance sequence. Like literally, this becomes a musical, which I don't remember thinking.
Sweat is pouring off.
That man works. You gotta let him know. Like, this is what cocaine will do for you.
Oh yeah.
Let's see here. But yeah, I didn't remember this movie basically being like half a musical. I didn't remember it being that. I was like always the car chases and the weird scenes, but like, oh no, there's a lot of song and dance sequences too.
Oh yeah.
Jake is shaking and he sees the light and like a light comes down on him, but only he can see it. And he deems they need to get the band back together. And so Jake backflips into into dancing, and he's dancing with the crowd. And this is really like the magic of Jane Belushi. I'm pretty sure they got a stuntman. Well, maybe, I don't know, maybe he could have done those backflips. I mean, there's also a cross section between John Belushi and Chris Farley, where it's just kind of like active big
guys
men.
that were very physical.
Yeah. But it is also the stark difference between Dan Aykroyd and John Belushi, because John Belushi, you can see the magic in him, like what liveliness he brings to it, and you can see Dan Aykroyd, and I'm not sure if he's intentionally playing his character weird and awkward, but it's like whenever Dan Aykroyd dances, it's weird and awkward, and whenever John Belushi does anything, it just seems natural and cool. And I don't know if it's a character thing or if that's just Dan Aykroyd. Because then Elroyd is struck by the band idea, and then he does his goofy dance where he's just kind of doing like a weird like Running Man or something.
Yeah,
like a running in place dance thing, and he doesn't fit in with all the cool black people dancing around, but John Belushi does. So again, I don't know if that's character or just Dan Aykroyd, but Dan Aykroyd's a guy, like, a lot of things don't happen if Dan Aykroyd's not there, so he might not be the best at everything, but things happen because Dan Aykroyd's there. So that would be in the end of Act 1. Because now we have the thing, we got to get the band back together. So we have Act 2. So the Blues Brothers want to get the band back together, but apparently everyone went out and got straight jobs. Elwood guns a yellow light, and then they get pulled over by the state police, which they call them rollers.
Yeah, I've never heard that term before.
Yeah, so I don't know. Yeah, I don't know where that comes from or goes to, but here Elwood is worried they have a computer criminal database, and that's exactly what happens. They do. They have a computer on board, and so Elwood just has like a ton of parking violations, a warrant out for his arrest for parking violations. His license is suspended. And it says arrest driver, impound vehicle. And so when they go to like bring his license back, he just takes off and the state police give chase. Here's where you get he says, they're not going to catch us. We're on a mission from God. And this is the first mention of the mission from God, which is a constant refrain throughout the movie. Does Elwood only say that, or does Jake say that at some point? Does he also say we're on a mission from God, or is that only?
I think they both say it at some point, but
okay.
you remember when Elwood says it because it's always that flat delivery.
Yeah, and in the heavy Chicago accent, like mission from God. They end up like crashing through a Toys R Us and into the mall. This is a crazy sequence. This is the magic of irresponsible filmmaking. Yeah. I didn't even look at I forget the trivia on this. Is like this a real mall, or they just build a set, or what? Or is this a mall that was being decommissioned or something? Did you look up any of this?
Called what's it called? It has a name to it. I think it's called the Dixie Mall.
Yeah.
Dixie Square Mall in Harvey, Illinois, because they actually jumped over a drawbridge, and I think it was closed in it was closed in '78 and left abandoned, and then the Blues Brothers like got a permit to shoot there, and they drew they kind of like mocked up some storefronts and actual buildings and put some lights behind it. But they were driving through like a mall like that, which is, I mean, stunt people and extras just like pinned to the walls and stuff. All these cars were driving insanely high speeds through these
just tons of glass storefronts. Oh, it's amazing. And all the cars, like, they're kind of squirrely driving, so they're all just like drifting and like
I don't know how well those big heavy cars with those wide format suspensions would do on linoleum tile. How cars handle in those.
There's also, you get a cameo because a bunch of there's a bunch of state troopers also join the chase. There's like 3 of them chasing them in the mall. This is one of the reasons why you don't really have like cop chases like you used to, because if someone's driving that fast, they just kind of let them go and then pick them up later.
Yeah, if someone starts driving through the mall, they're not following them.
But again, that's the fun of this movie, is like that's irresponsible and that's hilarious until somebody gets killed, then it's not. I don't know if there's any injuries in this movie.
I never heard of I know it's like considered the most expensive comedy ever made,
Yeah.
mainly because of the stunts and the number of vehicles that were destroyed, and the fact that they basically had to run a full-time body shop for the whole shooting of the movie just to keep repairing like the hero cars and stuff. Because even though they had multiple versions of the Bluesmobile, it was just getting torn to pieces, and they had to keep rebuilding it, repainting the body, and making it look different for different scenes. And yeah, so it was like, yeah, this movie's budget like ballooned double what it was supposed to. I mean, in today's money, it'd be like an $80 million comedy. Like that's how
Yeah.
much money it would have cost to do that today.
Which yeah, I think only like maybe The Hangover was a comedy that would have that kind of budget. Like nobody,
Yeah.
no. I mean, the thing about comedies is you make them cheap, and then even sometimes it's like, well, the cheapness of it is what makes it hilarious, and so they even spend even less money on it. It's like, isn't it funny how much money we don't have? It's like sometimes if you're talented.
Yeah, only if it works, but not in the case of this movie.
But John Landis gets a cameo here because the cop car that ends up upside down, he's one of the cops in that car.
Yeah. The one that's rolling on its roof, which
Yeah.
it's like, it would be nice if that happened in real life because lives would have been saved. But usually when a car of that era goes on its roof, you're just getting crushed. You cannot support the weight of the entire giant heavy vehicle.
Then we cut to we get the Peter Gunn theme playing, which happens a lot in this movie.
Yes.
Which I don't know if you know what the Peter Gunn thing. What was that? Was that like a British spy show, or what was Peter Gunn?
I think so. Yeah, I think it was a spy. Was that the Danger Man? I can't remember.
It's also and they also use the same theme in the video game Spy Hunter, which came like later on in the 80s. So yeah, it's just been around. I don't know if it's like in public domain, but like the Peter Gunn theme has been used to put in a bunch of things.
Yeah, I imagine it is. I'm trying to look up the music for the movie because it's this massive list. Anyway,
they park in an alleyway. Here we see Carrie Fisher, who's just listed as Mystery Woman, but I'll just refer to her as Carrie for the rest of this. She shows up and shoots a rocket launcher at them. They like trip and fall, and I don't know if it's intentionally or just like, God helping them out, whatever. The rockets miss them. She takes off, like the whole the front door is like blown up and stuff, and they just kind of get up like nothing happened. Here, like, it literally says on the building, it says Hotel for Transient Men.
yeah.
So this is where Elwood's been living. It's a small room, like one room, like that's basically just a small closet hallway thing. The L train shakes the room often, like it just basically never stops. And Jake's like, it's like, how often does a train come by? He's like, often enough that you'll get used to it. Which I don't know. I've never. This is like a constant thing, especially in movies in Chicago, about like, everyone lives next to the L train. Which, if you don't know, means the elevated train.
We took that around Chicago.
Yeah.
Several times.
But like almost in everything that takes place in Chicago, it's like everybody lives next to the L. I've never actually been in a room that was like next to the L, other than like, the train platform. So I actually don't know how noisy it is.
It looks cool.
Yeah.
To drive underneath, and it's also when you're doing it at 120 miles an hour like they are later in this movie, for real. It's like, oh yeah, hit one of those metal poles. Watch the car like extrude around the other side like grated cheese. Yeah, that's it's always been those have always been they film there's a lot of cool places to film in Chicago, and this was one of the first movies I think that filmed there in a long time.
Well, I mean, like the French Connection was not too long before this, and also had a very famous car chase. But
yeah, in the same area, same exact place too.
Yeah. Oh yeah, this is where like Elwood has his like coat hanger toaster that he hangs on like a little like heating element. Very a jail thing. But I don't know.
Well, remember when, and I do like it after they get the rocket fired or the quad rocket system fired at them. They just kind of brush themselves off and walk inside, like they don't really acknowledge it. And then as he's heading upstairs, the guy's like, "Hey, Elwood, you got my cheese whiz?" And he's like, "Oh yeah." And
He just pulls it
out of his pocket and throws it to him and just keeps going, like
yeah.
non sequitur. That's what I like the most. I want to live my life like this with people when they ask me weird stuff. It's like, "Yep, I got your cheese whiz."
I was thinking of you, transient man.
Yeah. Dude, they're always helping people. And where was where was that cheese whiz all this time?
Jake passes out. Elwood sleeps in a chair. It's the next day. Carrie Fisher shows up again. And officer. Well, she just has like a remote control device.
Oh yeah.
So you don't know what it is. You don't know what that is doing yet. Officer Mount shows up, and John Candy, who plays Burton Mercer. He's like a detective.
Parole officer.
Oh, is it parole? Okay, that makes sense. Because they're wanted now, but like Elwood wrote his address as Wrigley Field, and so they did some digging, and it's like, this is where they're really at. So they go up to like go arrest them, and then as they kick open the door, Carrie Fisher hits her remote control device, and just the whole like front of the building just collapses in because a bomb blows up.
Yeah.
Yeah, again, a very crazy scene. And then the Blues Brothers just casually crawl out of the rubble and brush themselves on, and then like continue on their task of reforming the band.
Yeah, I mean, they were like dead asleep. They're basically waking up under rubble, and they just like, just dust themselves off, climb out of these bricks, and just go on. And that's what I love about this movie. All kinds of scenes like that where, I mean, you don't know, like 100 people could have died in the collapse of that building. You don't know how many people are in there or what they're doing. Because you see, like, the cops, like, John Candy crawl out a little later.
Yeah.
But it's like,
They stop at a house looking for band members. This is Miss Tarantino.
Yes.
Which I remember thinking, like, Quentin Tarantino, that's a weird name. So I guess, that name was in the ether before he became known. So, She asks, "Are you the police?" Because they sound official, and of course, Elwood's very monotone, and so she basically like they're in suits, so she just lets them thinking they're like official people or whatever, and she's like, "Oh, you're looking for the guys like are you the police?" And he just goes, "No, ma'am, we're musicians." So,
they're asking like weird questions, like what were their habits? What did they do? Like they know these people, but they're just like, well, they were loud at night, but they were good boys. They're asking strange questions in a strange way.
And she's just rolling with it. It's like, I'll tell these men. They seem nice. And then she hands them a card where they find out that the other band members are like doing like dinner performances or something. Yeah, this is where we learned that Jake got put in jail for robbing a gas station to pay for the band's bar tab. Because this is where they're trying to convince the band, like, we need to get back together. I was like, do you know what he did for you? That's why he's been in jail the whole time. Why the band broke up and stuff like that.
Yeah, Murph and the Magic Tones are playing at a Holiday Inn somewhere where nobody's around.
Which I've never been to those places, but it's always like a thing in Hollywood is like, these dinner theaters or whatever exist, but I've never been to one.
Oh, I've been on the road, like going to different car plants, like looking at stuff and sorting things. Yeah, they'll have some local group in the hotel lounge. It's like, hey, you want to watch this? It's like, no, this just screams depression at me. This is like, yes, the day's in where dreams come to die. Nope.
So they convinced the Murph and the what was it, the Magic Tone?
The Magic Tone.
It's kind of fun. There's two Murphys in the band.
Yeah.
Or is he's also Murphy, or is it Murph his first name?
Let's see. There's an actual musician. Let
Yeah,
me.
all these musicians are like that's their actual names or whatever in the
Yeah,
movies.
Murphy Dunn. That's Murph in the Magic Tones. That's his
Okay.
first name is Murphy. And then there's a Matt Guitar Murphy.
Yeah.
He's the cook, Aretha Franklin's husband.
Yeah.
So he's like, he's the next guy they find. And they basically like Aretha Franklin does one of her famous songs, and he just decides, yeah, I'm going to leave my family and go with the Blues Brothers. It's like okay, cool.
Then we cut to the Blues Brothers like spin park their car at a fancy restaurant.
I love this scene. I've
They're
acted something like this before when I'm trying to annoy people when they're really snobby. How much for the little girl? How much? I will buy them. How much? It's like, you better shut up. They never react like the guy in the movie does. People always want to get up and fight. And I'm like, I'm just kidding. Because whenever people get snotty with me, I'll act like it's some kind of weird foreigner, like some kind of strange Eastern European. It's like, are you acting this way because you want me to sleep with your wife while you watch? Is this what you're telling me? Is it small? Usually end up getting punched, but it's funny. It's a fun story.
They're here to recruit Mr. Fabulous, which I can't remember. Is he like the piano player or what is
Yes.
he?
I
Okay.
think he is. No, he's a trumpet player.
Okay. They're immediately clocked by the crowd as being invaders in a room full of rich people.
Yeah, yeah. It's a fancy French restaurant.
Yeah.
I mean, they're selling wine for, Pee Wee Herman is selling them a bottle of wine for like $150 and like $80, which like that's expensive.
Oh, I didn't spot that was
Yeah, that was Pee Wee Herman, Paul Rubens himself.
um
He didn't
They
do the weird voice like when he had the cameo in his own movie, Paging Mr. Herman. You remember that one? The voice over him because
yeah.
I was hoping he would talk like that again. It's like, that's weird. I'm gonna have to research why they do that, but it didn't happen.
They sit down to eat. They're slurping champagne,
Yeah.
which is fun.
And they're eating like the
shrimp cocktail, but like giant shrimp.
They're crossing their arms, getting it on their face,
and throwing pieces into each other's mouth.
Yeah, I love it. I would love to do that in an expensive restaurant. Yeah, just like the one guy's like got bread and he's like blocking his hand and it flies into the guy's mouth. Like, this is amazing. And everyone's looking at him like,
Yeah, and then this is where
sir, come here. He calls the maitre d' over. Those men smell bad.
Jake puts on some Eastern European accent and is actually asking some rich guy to sell, like, how much for the women.
Yeah.
And then they basically end up blackmailing Mr. Fabulous into getting back into the band with them, which is a nefarious tactic, but it seems to work for them pretty much the whole movie. And
he says he's making $600 a week being the maitre d' there. It's like, oh, he's pulling down as much as like an executive for. It's like, yeah, let's screw him out.
We cut the next day. This comes out of nowhere. There's a white power Nazi group spreading propaganda in front of a much larger crowd of protesters. So obviously they're not liked, but
which is weird because like Illinois is that's where Lincoln Rockwell was from, and so there are real Nazi like roots there in Illinois. That's why it was so funny when they were talking like, oh shit, Illinois Nazis. Oh yeah, they're really were Illinois Nazis at one time.
So because the Nazis are blocking traffic, there's like the traffic's backed up, and then here we cut to like Jake, and or maybe it's Elwood. He goes, "I hate Illinois Nazis," and then he just guns the car through the Nazis, and they all have to like jump off the bridge, and the Nazis like get that man's license plate, and they basically declare revenge.
Yeah.
And then they're just set off to the side for a while. So and then we get the what is it? What's it? Was it something Lee Hooker? Is it John Lee Hooker?
Lee Hooker. Wow. Everyone knows that.
Which from this podcast and the earlier format, we heard a bunch of times for the NCIS New Orleans. That was the theme song for that show.
Very famous.
But here they are in Chicago, so yeah. um, yeah, here's where they go to the restaurant, and Elwood asks for dry toast, and it's like, "You want anything on it, butter?" He's like, "Dry." And then she asks Jake, "It's like, what do you want?" And he's like, 4 fried chickens and a Coke. And then she's like, "Do you want like chicken wings or breasts?" And he just reiterates, 4 fried chickens and a Coke, meaning he wants whole fried chickens.
Yeah, I just want whole fryers and a Coke. It's like, that's like 5,000 calories.
Although you ever heard of the Fool's Gold?
Yes.
It's like this famous treat that Elvis would have, where he would just like fly him and his cronies out to like Las Vegas or something just to get the sandwich, which is like a whole French loaf of bread scooped out and filled with like peanut butter and jelly and bacon.
And fried.
Yes, and fried.
Dropped into a fryer. Yeah, and he's flying like his private 707. It's, which even at that back then, that would be like $3,000 or $4,000 in just fuel. It's like, okay, cool. I've actually tried something like that.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh yeah, it's good. I mean, it's good. I think there's also a banana in there.
Okay, yeah. So there's a lot of stuff in there.
It's amazing. I've made a version of it at home.
It sounds amazing and awful at the same time. But it's like, I gotta try this at some point. But it's also like mythological almost, and like, its stature. So,
oh no, if you can. What did I do? I did a version of it. I forget. I used a different kind of bread, but yeah, I essentially hollowed something out. Peanut butter, jelly, a banana in it, and I put it in an oven and fried it in butter. And I ate it. I ate the whole damn thing. And it was amazing. I don't know if it was good as what Elvis had, but it's like, oh, I get it. But I did it out of curiosity and because I like food, not because I'm running from my childhood or something. Different format, the reason I did it.
But yeah, Aretha Franklin here is the waitress, and then Matt Guitar Murphy is the cook at the restaurant, and they're a married couple. Well, presumably they're married, or yeah,
I don't know if they have a family or whatever. He takes off pretty quick with the blues.
Then it turns into a musical dance sequence. And I didn't know if wait, is this Aretha Franklin's Freedom Song, or is this just like greatest hits like thrown in here of like recognizable Aretha Franklin kind of like lines, or is this just her, or is this where that song came from?
No, I think this was just an Aretha Franklin song they repurposed for this.
Okay, all right.
For this movie.
Yeah, but of course she's great. She's Aretha Franklin. So.
Yeah, it was amazing. It was like, oh, this is probably the coolest thing, except for John Lee Hooker in front of the place. This was probably the coolest song in the movie. Well, no, the Blues Brothers song at the end was pretty cool.
Yeah. And then like people are dancing outside, and it's just dancing occurring everywhere. The Blues Brothers like going dancing. And then it kind of slows down, and we also have the other cook, like the line cook or whatever, however that works out, playing the saxophone.
Yes.
And then Matt grabs his guitar, and then he quits, and like Aretha Franklin's like, "Hey, if you leave, like we're done." He's like, "Okay," and then throws his apron on the floor and walks out. And it's like, and again, it's another like auspicious situation. It's like, it really doesn't seem like joining the Blues Brothers is the best idea.
Yeah, it's like, did you hear this woman sing? And like, we don't know if they're married, if they have kids at home, but he's just walking out. You better think about what you're doing to me. It's like, you don't know what that means. But again, like you said earlier, just like the casual disrespect for like human suffering in this movie what makes it interesting and fun. It's like, there's no consequences in real life. Come with us. We're on a mission from God.
Well, the thing that
used to justify a lot of irresponsible things. So
Well, the only thing that softens it here is that like the saxophonist line cook like kind of looks at her and is like, "Can I go too?" And she's like, "Yeah, go ahead."
Yeah. So it's like I'm not going to be able to feed my kids now. That's yeah. So it does kind of suck, because that's the thing. Like, this movie is about irresponsibility and goofy action, but there's also like a subtext here of like, oh no, people's lives suck, and poor, it sucks to be poor. It sucks to be an orphan or an ex-con or a black person in general, because it's like, well, you have cool churches and everyone breaks out into song and dance, but your lives ultimately suck, and you've got Illinois Nazis chasing you around, or the good old boys.
We cut to the Curl Up and Die beauty salon.
I know, I love that. I saw that. I was like, that's great. I think it was the first time. This viewing was the first time I noticed that.
Which, I mean, there's been like, you know, Airplane came out before this or just the year before, so you know it's a you know, that kind of comedy where it's just like jokes and gags in the background. Like it's in the milieu, but it's not too hardcore here. But there is a lot of stuff like that where it's just, you know, like the Hotel for Transient Men and the Curl Up and Die Beauty. There is stuff like that kind of sprinkled throughout, but it's not constant like the Airplane movies and stuff.
Yeah,
like
I mean,
that.
like that's my kind of humor, like the complete non sequitur humor where no one's acknowledging.
Yeah.
It's just up to the audience to read that. It's like, where are they going? What the hell's going on? But the thing with Airplane, like, the reason it's one of my favorite movies of all time is just like the gags per minute of really funny stuff is like, that's got to be a record breaking movie. That
well, it's also like
alone. It's like,
like most comedies, it's like once you watch it once, there's no reason to watch it again. It's like the jokes are going to get less every time. The great thing about Airplane movies is just finding little jokes in the background and stuff. That's
and
amazing.
an Airplane, like watching it with the modern world we live in, it's just like where Arab guys could buy bombs at the gift shop in the airport. Like, oh, that was funny and ridiculous. Even though planes were being blown up then, it's like, oh, we can laugh. You couldn't come within 10 miles of doing that now, regardless of how funny it was. So yeah, the Curl Up and Die salon was.
Here we have. Well, here it's Carrie is looking at a manual for a flamethrower, and that's just kind of like the in between. It's like, well, we know that's probably going to pop up then.
Yeah.
Next day, the band is going to a musical instrument store. Ray Charles is the salesman.
Yep.
Here it's like, yo, everybody knows, oh, it's Ray Charles. He's blind. But here they don't necessarily like, you're blind. It's just funny that we know Ray Charles is blind and he's
no
just
one acknowledges
it. Like a kid in the background is trying to steal a guitar and Ray just fires a gun at the wall. It's like sad to see the young ones trying to go and turning on the wrong side.
Which no one really reacts to in any way. Like a guy just fired off a gun in a store who was ostensibly blind, didn't kill anyone but came close, and he shot at a kid, and everyone's like, anyway, you know, that's what I love about that kind of humor. Is like, whatever, it's not my problem.
He's trying to sell him a piano. He says, I think he sell it for $2,000. He says, I'll throw the black keys in for free, which is a fun thing. So yeah, it's a fun little salesman thing where they try to like, no, this whole thing comes together because they're going to make it sound like they're giving you a deal on stuff that just comes with the unit. I like to tell customers when we install furnaces that like it comes with a free fire alarm check. You know, just a little joke. Because new furnaces, they put like a kind of oil on them for keeping them from corroding in like transportation and storage.
Yeah.
And so when you fire them up, like it'll kind of like have this kind of weird kind of light marshmallowy linoleum smell that'll come out. And dust, you know, kind of like dust that's been sitting around starting to get hit with heat, and then I'll set off all the fire alarms usually. So it's like, free fire alarm check.
Yeah. Gonna know everything's working.
So yeah, the guy's like, yeah, this piano doesn't have any action, and so Ray plays the piano to prove it's got action, and of course, you know, he does a great job because it's Ray Charles.
Yeah, and it's amazing. Yeah.
Another thing where like people are just dancing outside and everything. It's just it's non sequitur. It's just there's dancing everywhere. It's like it's a musical dance sequence. So just everything's happening all at once. And then we kind of end with like the Blues Brothers, like they're gonna get their instruments for the band, and then Ray knows like they don't have any money for them, so it's like, well, I guess it's gonna be an IU, isn't it? Yeah. And they're kind of sad. It's like
as usual, it's an IOU. But he says it in that Ray Charles way, where it sounds cool.
Yeah, it's like it softens it a bit. It's like, the brothers got to make a phone call. Here, there's like you can see framed directly intentionally in the background is just a giant propane tank, and then she hits the propane tank with a flamethrower that explodes, which comically sends a model of a phone booth flying into the air, like almost like Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure. That's what it looks like. And then it falls to the ground, and they just get out like nothing happens. Like, hey, like we're out of money because like all they had was like a quarter to make a call. It's like, hey, we got $7 here because the phone cracked open when it fell.
It came back down to the ground, and no one got hurt. And again, they just kind of get up and like, well, on to the next thing.
Then we cut to the Nazis figure out like that they're after the Blues Brothers. But then they end up going to Wrigley Field because they get duped by like where they left, which means that like, oh, the Nazis have infiltrated the Illinois government.
Yeah.
I don't know. Who knows at that time? I don't know. Maybe all that stuff was just free to the public if you knew. But
yeah, I mean, I think like with that stuff, you had to like know where to look.
Yeah.
It's not like today where there's like someone in a computer in the basement somewhere. Right, access things that, and a lot of things, and that was all like that was still like 1980 was still like they were just getting into computers. There was a lot more paper stuff back then.
Yeah,
and you had to know where to look. And I'm sure if you had like a dedicated enough Obergruppenführer, and depends on what part of the city government he worked in, he could probably find out all kinds of things.
Yeah,
or the Nazis were the cops and they didn't want to say that. Because now they'd say that.
Yeah.
Because remember, the Republicans used to say, like, we're not racist. Nowadays, it's like, no, we're racist. So it's like, yeah, no one's hiding it.
We're racist. We're on your side. Remember that.
It's kind of weird how poignant the Illinois Nazis are today versus, almost 40 years ago when this movie was made. It's like, oh, that was a joke back then. Now it's like, wow, we're back into serious territory.
Then we cut to Bob's Country Bunker
in Kokomo, Indiana.
It's a country bar that's mostly empty at the moment, but they haven't started yet. Jake bluffs his way into stealing the original band spot, which is the Good Old Boys the band.
Yeah, it's funny. The Blues Brothers show up. They look like anything but the Good Old Boys, and it's like, okay, cool.
There's chicken wire on the stage so people can throw beer bottles at them.
Yeah. Which, by the way, would still shatter and fly through.
Yeah.
Well,
actually. And does. That's what it does here.
If you can shatter glass on chicken wire, I'm actually pretty impressed. It's like that's like really taut chicken wire, or it's like this stainless steel chicken wire that has no give. But yeah, for the purpose of the movie, it's an interesting thing.
I've always heard like stories of bands like you're playing a shit place when they have like chicken wire or like a fencing up in front of it because like the crowd is going to assault the
have outside, inside. That's in case they rush the stage so we don't have to pay your medical bill. You're some happy people.
Let's see here. They start playing So Glad You Made It, and then like the crowd's not having it. Like they just want to hear country music. I think he says like I think Jake at some point asked like the waitress like, what kind of music do you play here? And she's like, both kinds, country and western. Yeah. And so what's funny here is that like they get mad hearing a song that they don't want to hear, or they don't want to hear anything new or good, and so they start throwing beer bottles and stuff at the stage. But then when they play a song they like, they still throw beer bottles at the stage. It's just something you do.
Yeah, it's just like we're still angry. Our lives still suck, but we just prefer hearing Rawhide like 500 times, or whatever the joke was. And they also played "Stand by Your Man," which was funny.
Yeah, they start playing Rawhide in here, but Jake is like reluctantly singing back up, where he's just like picking up
doing the deep voice part of it.
Yeah. But he's very annoyed that he doesn't get to play the music he wants to. Then they play "Stand by Your Man," and then like the this kind of calms the crowd down, especially the couples. And it brings one lonely guy to tears.
Yeah, the guy literally in the stereotypical long haul trucker guy crying.
Then it comes to the like pony up. It's like they're trying to get the money for the performance, and it's like, well, you earned $200, but you drank $300 worth of beer, so so now they need to skip out on the tab.
Yeah.
And so and because of this, the band, because they know like they just stole this gig, so they don't have a gig that Jake promised them, and so the band is basically already on the verge of breaking up. So it's like this isn't going well. The brothers skip out on the tab, but
then the actual good old boys show up.
Yeah,
like way later, like the bar is closed and they're late. Gig for some reason that's never explained. And then Jake tries to run like a union scam on them. It's like, you boys got your performer's card or whatever. And then he gives them an obviously Jewish name, like, oh, I'm Mr. Steiner or whatever. I'm, rep for these parts, and you got to have a card to perform. And of course, who's the guy who plays the head of the good old boys? He's been in everything.
Yeah.
What's his name? Charles Napier. Who's like, I think he might still be alive. Oh no, he died in 2011. But yeah, this guy from anything.
Yeah.
He's basically like implying it's like, yeah, I got a card for you and I'll shove it up your ass, or it was something like that. I forget. He's like, well, let me go talk to the owner and see what I can work out. And then he walks away from him, facing him, walking backwards to the car. And they basically just skip out on the tab.
Now the band pulls up in like one of those kind of bus Winnebagos, but then they give chase in like a smaller Winnebago.
Yeah, I never understood like who owns that? The Bob's Bunker Country Bunker guy, or is that a second? Is that an escape vehicle they had? Because you got like four guys in the top looking out.
Yeah, it's very weird.
And then you got like the main singer and the owner of the bar in the cabin driving.
Yeah, and Charles Napier is loading up a double barrel shotgun. And they shoot out the back window of the car.
Yeah.
But then like the Blues Brothers cross the state police that they've met before, and then as they start to go pull after him, they end up running into the Winnebago. And that wrecks both the Winnebago and the cars, and then they arrest the good old boys.
Yeah.
But only for a little bit. They'll show back up.
What they arrested them for, I wouldn't know, because technically just slammed into the side of them. Maybe for shooting out the window. I don't know.
Yeah.
Probably was illegal back then. I'm not sure.
The brothers meet with Maury the Booker, which they just make this character like obviously Jewish. I don't know. Yeah. I don't necessarily know why. It's like, well, that could be just like, this is who this guy is. Like, I'm not hiding it and stuff. But it seems like a stereotypical thing where it's like, oh yeah, like the management guy is Jewish, of course. That's how it works.
And they're meeting in a sauna.
Yeah.
It's like weird. Towels on. Well, initially you see the three of them. They're sitting towels on.
Yeah, then they comically reveal that the entire band is there, just off in the corner, like shoulder to shoulder, which is a great reveal.
Yeah, and this like sauna that must be as big as like a football stadium. It's got all these people in it.
They cut to the orphanage, like they're having their stuff repossessed, which is always a thing that happens in movies. So,
Yeah, they just send like moving guys in to take all your stuff. It's like, yeah, I don't think that's actually how that works. It's an effective like visual, I guess. You know what's going on.
I mean, I've seen stuff where it's like there was like a like low income housing on the street, and like every like week or month you would just see like, oh, someone's entire life is just thrown on the side of the
Oh yeah,
on the
there's like
street.
couches on the side of the road and books and
It's like, oh,
clothes.
somebody did get evicted, but I've never seen like in the midst of like, oh, you're on the verge of eviction, and so we're just starting the process early and taking all their stuff. It's like,
Yeah.
because there's never like the follow up. It's like, well, we got the money. You gotta put that stuff back. It's like, nope.
Yeah,
So.
because before you serve the eviction notice, if you do that, that's just called robbery. Is what that. That's how that works. But yeah, but it's an effective in a movie to convey something without having to explain it. So
yeah, it's like the walls are closing in kind of thing. So
yeah.
The montage. There's a montage of the brothers advertising their show because they get a big gig at some, like, I think it's called like the Palace or something. I don't know if it's a real place or not, probably. But they're like, he's like, yeah, I'll get you the room, but it's like it's way too big for you guys, being that like no, like I don't know if you don't know how big the Blues Brothers were before, so you don't know if anybody knows them now. There's like must be no nostalgia for the act. So it's like, how are you going to sell a room for a band that's just reformed that people barely know who it is anyway? But, you know, they're on a mission from God, so it'll work out.
So they put the largest speaker you can find. They just rope tie it down to the top of the Bluesmobile. It looks like an air raid siren.
Yeah. And then they even have like Curtis like has like all the orphans, like not as like labor, just like, hey kids, you want to get the word out? So, and then it's onto the kids, onto themselves. They were trying to like, hey, go see the Blues Brothers, like, so we can keep a house.
I like how there's no dark subtext about, hey kids, you want to keep living in a Catholic orphanage for boys?
That can't pay its rent.
That never becomes like a thing. Like, oh no.
And then the Bluesmobile runs out of gas, and then they get to the gas station, which is also out of gas. Which for a late 70s movie would make sense. That was was a thing. So, which I think there's been one time I've been to a gas station where it was like, we're out of gas.
I haven't seen that a lot. I've seen it sometimes.
I want to say it was like 2 days after 9/11. There was just a rush on gas.
Oh, yeah, I remember. Yeah, the gas was like $5 a gallon here, well, at some places.
Yeah,
and then I remember those places like immediately came under new ownership like 2 months later. If you did that, they're like, oh, they just pulled your business license. There was no change in price that justified that. They were just gouging people.
Yeah.
So Rashid's cousin had to come in and buy it from, Yemen or wherever. At least that's what happens around here. I don't know. But what in other places.
So that's the end of Act 2. We have Act 3. We have the palace is filling up with fans and enemies. It's a great
Illinois
crowd.
Nazis, the good old boys, and the Illinois State Police, who all kind of serve the same master in some people's eyes, know that the Blues Brothers are going to be at the Palace Hotel Ballroom north of Chicago. By the way, not a real place, just something.
Oh, okay. Elwood hits on some British lady, which I guess here is this Twiggy?
Yeah, Twiggy. She was a supermodel at that time.
Yeah, I only vaguely know of her.
She was kind of a hottie from a different era.
I only know her of Bill Maher's description of her, because of course Bill Maher, of course he's very what do you say that charitable to people's emotions, and he's describing Marilyn Monroe.
Guy.
Yeah. He was describing Marilyn Monroe as a giant fat ass, and Twiggy was like the correct proportions for a supermodel and stuff like that.
Yeah.
It's like, thanks, Bill.
I want him and James Woods to read my eulogy at my funeral. I really love the way they talk about people. It's fun. About about people who don't deserve. If you deserve it, I'm all for. Yeah, talk as mean as you want about people, but yeah, don't like. yeah. Twiggy was not of the big voluptuous booty era of models.
I forget what's going on here. He like kind of cons her out of $95 and then says like, "Hey, wait for me at this hotel." And I don't know what that whole subplot is about.
Someone who was developing that movie was trying to bang Twiggy and put her in it.
Oh, okay.
I mean, that's literally how someone explained it. And I was like, well, that might be true. Or it's like, it makes the most sense. I don't know if it's true. I'd have to ask Dan Aykroyd the next time I see him.
Well, it's interesting aside because it's like the whole time it's like Elwood is pretty much, the weird, like, straight guy here. So it is weird that he's like, and sexless. So it is weird that he's like hitting on a woman here. It's like, where's this going? So.
Yeah, and it's also cool that he cons her out of like like $80 more than what it should have cost. And of course, she doesn't think anything of it. Like, oh, here, you keep the change. So yeah, he's like trying to con her in two ways.
But yeah, they get money for gas, and then the truck shows up with gas to fill up the gas station. They get their gas and they pull away. They park the brothers park their car under a bridge. And
let's not forget that they also accidentally like explode the gas station.
Oh, they do. For some reason, I forgot that.
Yeah, like I forget. Like somebody throws a lighter down on the ground. It's just something like silly that happens, and it's like the most violent. It's like even bigger than the gas station explosion at the end of Maximum
RoboCop
Drive.
Oh, okay.
It's like an insane explosion of this gas station. It's like, oh, okay, they just had to put that in. But again, they just like, we're just driving away from whatever.
That's not our problem. Never will be. So they park their car under a bridge and they pan up to like basically the whole state police are after them. Like every inch of the bridge is covered with cars and cops with shotguns.
Yeah.
It's a great shot.
Oh yeah, it's insane. And so then Elwood like has a canister of this volatile gas that like as soon as the police cars start taking off, the tires will explode.
Oh, okay.
Now, this might have been on the long version I watched, and maybe it wasn't in yours because it seemed like an extra scene almost. It's like, oh, yeah, they spend 5 minutes explaining how they're sabotaging all the police cars like parked on the outside so the other ones can't get past them.
Yeah.
But it's time to leave. I don't know if you saw that or not.
No, the one I was thinking of is he has like the can of glue where he sabotages the good old boys.
Yeah,
like
that happens too, but he also has gas that he's like putting in the tires.
Okay, that makes sense.
Of the police cars. That's why their tires explode as soon as they
yeah, that makes sense why the cop cars are flying and exploding and tripping all over themselves. Okay, that would make a logical sense. That seems unnecessary to explain for a comedy, but it's fun. So
part of the mechanics of the whole thing.
Yeah. It's like, how is this happening? Like, here you go. Are you happy now? It's like, no, I'm autistic, so I don't understand humor. But anyways, Curtis covers for the brothers and buys them some time, so he breaks out into his own performance. This is kind of the vaudeville call and response performance, which really gets the crowd, who are like very angry,
very angry.
Like they're happy to see the Blues Brothers, but they're late, so now they're angry.
Yeah, this is this guy's like signature thing. He does Minnie the Moocher.
Yeah,
which is it's like that kind of scat jazz vaudeville where he's like howdy. Everyone's heard this. Everyone knows this.
Yeah.
Which is actually it's a sort of like, oh, if I was in a jazz club in the 30s and I was drunk, this would be fun to listen to. Like I get it.
The brothers are outside. They need to sneak into their own performance because all the cops are outside covering the doors, which is funny because they just like have them kind of like hiding behind columns where it's like you could see them for miles, and there's just one cop who's sleeping standing up. So yeah, that's just fun.
Yeah.
Here's where we get Elwood sabotaging the good old boy band bus by like he glues the accelerator down and the top of the accelerator, so their foot will be stuck to the gas pedal too.
Yeah.
Here's where the cops decide that they're going to hang out. It's like, well, I haven't heard him sing, so why don't we not arrest him just yet? It's just like, let's let him sing.
And we're only pulling like $100,000 every 10 minutes of overtime on this operation. Let's take in the show while we're
so the brothers break into the ladies' room to make their way in. They make their entrance to but the crowd is contentious and has their arms crossed. It's like, no, you better entertain us. You can't just be introduced and expect us to be happy. Here they play Everybody, or it's like everybody. And then they yeah.
They did this on Saturday Night Live, I think.
Oh, okay. They win the crowd over. Then they go to the back, and there's they score a recording deal for like $10,000. And they're like, yeah, and they sign a contract or whatever and just take a bag of money with $10,000 in it. Or wait, no, the guy has a stack of cash. I forget, Elwood just has a bag for some reason. I can't remember. Maybe that's why he has all his sabotage.
It has all their songs in it.
Oh, okay. But now they have 10 grand, so now it's like, well, it's clean money. Oh yeah. So the band covers for them as they exit. I'm glossing over. There was there's 15 minutes song and dance sequence here, but I'm not going to explain. And that's what happens.
Well, I mean, it's a great. Okay, here's what's good about this: the penultimate song and dance scene at the Palace Hotel Ballroom, because this is what you've been waiting for to see from the Blues Brothers since this movie started. It's like, oh, what kind of amazing music are they going to put on? And it was actually amazing. What I thought the cool thing about it is that John Belushi and Dan Aykroyd, not musicians, not singers. Everyone else in the movie is.
Yeah.
So they kind of stand out of the way and let the band perform. And then they throw some lyrics in. You can tell it's choreographed or whatever. But really, if you pay attention to it, it's the music, not the lyrics, that kind of make all the songs cool.
Yeah.
Because this is where John Belushi and Dan Aykroyd are really smart. They know to kind of stand back at this point, throw in some lyrics, but let the band do their magic. Because all those guys, professional musicians, known for being musicians in the band, and it really works. It's cool. They don't try to overhype it and have to bring in actors to record or singers to record over them or anything. No, they actually do it and it works, but it's mostly driven by the music. So if you watch that whole Blues Brothers last performance in this movie, it's oh, that's kind of cool when you just sit there and think about it. Because they knew oh, this is our strengths, these are our weaknesses, we're going to get back, and this is why this is cool. It's why it's kind of an everyman We Love Music type movie right there for me.
Yeah.
I don't know if anyone else feels that way. I do.
And the crowd happy, so it's success.
I mean, it draws you into it, makes you believe in the movie. This right here, performance.
But the band keeps playing so that the brothers can leave, and so they cover their exit. They're leaving through the sewers, and this is where Carrie shows up, and she has an M16. She's
fully automatic.
Here she's kind of Patty Hearst looking.
Yeah, exactly. On purpose.
She shoots up the place, but misses them completely. So very
from God.
Yeah. And it's a Vietnam era M16, so that's very on point.
It's everything but the target.
That's what we have napalm for.
Smells like victory.
Well, I know there's a thing because, the M16 used to be fully automatic, and then they switched it to a 3-round burst because it was a light rifle, and the thing would just take off if you got it on full auto. And so, there's also a kind of you can they visually explain this in the Men Who Stare at Goats, where it's this is why we switched to semi-auto and 3-round burst, because people get in a hurry and just pull the trigger all the way back and fire off all the rounds and don't hit anything. So
yeah, because they're scared shitless.
Yeah,
someone's trying to kill them. It's oh yeah. If I make enough noise, I'll scare them away. You know, like, no, it's just a waste of money and time.
Here's where we figure out, like, because we never get, like, there's never explanation. They don't interact. She just tries to kill them, and then they just barely acknowledge that it happened. No one says who's that woman ever. It's just they just move on. And so here it's like you get the backstory that Carrie is mad at Jake for standing her up at their wedding. And like it's like, wait, when? And then like Elwood's not like, hey, when did that happen? He just stands back. It's like, well, this isn't my fight. Yeah, you do. Here's where Jake begs for his life very comically. He basically says every excuse. It's like, there was traffic, there was an earthquake, there was a tornado.
I didn't
please
have fair. It was like, yeah, 20 different excuses for the same thing.
Please don't kill me. And then he takes his glasses off, and this is where she just falls in love with him. And then he kisses her, and then he just drops her in the mud, and then they just take off like nothing happened.
Yeah, and apparently, like, as she describes it, like, she's like some kind of mob, like her family's like in the mafia.
Yeah.
Because she's like, oh yeah, my dad had to call all of his favors into Vinny the whatever. So it sounds like, oh yeah, this is why this lady has like guns and rocket launchers. Like she's she's related into organized crime somehow. And
yeah, they're stealing stuff off the Chicago docks.
Yeah.
Here's also we get another. They're back in the Bluesmobile, and here's in the underpass of the bridge, and we get another famous line where Elwood's like, it's 106 miles to Chicago. We got a full tank of gas, half a pack of cigarettes. It's dark, and we're wearing sunglasses. And Jake's just like, hit it. And they take off, and then the giant like speaker is comically knocked off the car.
Yeah. Yeah, and this is the best, like, this is one of the best car chase movies since like The Road Warrior, or it's like, because and the reason I don't say like Smokey and the Bandit or something is this is such a destructive car chase at this point.
Yeah,
it is so insanely like dangerous, violent, and very. Some of it's ridiculous, but a lot of it's like, yeah, that's what that would really be like,
Well, because it's so real, and the mass scale of it is like crazy. It's like, even like Fast and the Furious can't match up to what this movie does.
No, because they're driving under the L train at 120 miles an hour. When you see that, they just film that. I mean, those are stunt drivers. It wasn't those two guys. But yeah, it's like, oh yeah, they just filmed that. It's like, just drive as fast as you can. We got permits for this. So, because one of the reasons they didn't want, because there was a ban on filming in Chicago from like the early 70s until this movie was made, because before it got kind of destructive and dangerous.
Okay.
At this point, it just, because I believe it was Daily that like banned it. So I think the French Connection was the last one. They're like, no, this is really screwing everything up. Because, I don't know if you know about Richard Daley. He's the mayor. He's like the legacy mayor of Chicago.
Yeah. Large amounts of corruption, right?
Yeah. I mean, just like corruption was like, it wasn't like corruption, like big C corruption. It was like, oh, it's just built into the batter that this is corrupt. Like, you can complain about it, but the Windy City doesn't work without this shit. Like, that's how he governed. And also, when Martin Luther King got shot, and the lines used in this movie, it was like, remember when they said like any level of violence is acceptable in apprehending the Blues Brothers?
Yeah.
Remember when that went out over the radio? Okay, Daley actually said that when he said, hey, when Martin Luther King got shot, any riots in this city, there is no level of violence I would consider unacceptable to stop rioting. Which is like, you just can't even say shit like that anymore. Because if you said that now, the cops would be out in the streets. Like, I mean, we have a bad record of shit going. And they were doing it back then, too. But everyone didn't have a high-definition camera in their pocket to record it. So that was sort of the difference. But yeah.
That was also a crazy thing, like in that time, how much the National Guard was used for just like defensive purposes and stuff. And you never see that nowadays. Like, it's just like, is there a flood? We got some army guys that are going to throw some sandbags around. That's how the National Guard is used now. It's
Oh,
not.
when the Detroit riots happened and they were worried it was going to breach the city, they fired 50 caliber machine like Ma Deuces, that because that's what they had back then, the World War II stuff. They were
Yeah.
firing those into the city of Detroit to keep people off the one bridge. That was the National Guard was just out there. Yeah, it's like you're shooting into a city full of people with a 50 caliber. I mean, and it was recorded that it happened, and nobody knows who died. But yeah, oh yeah, that was nuts back in the 60s. There was also a lot more hatred back then, and a lot of naked hatred of like, yeah, bring a tank in, kill everyone. It's like, can't do that. Nobody wants that anymore. No one's comfortable with that level of destruction and violence.
And then, but also like when they take off out of the bridge and then knock off the speaker, and then Carrie shoots at them again, and the cops also shoot at them. But they don't stop Carrie, who has a fully automatic rifle, for shooting at somebody. They're like, "Oh, cool, got backup."
Yeah, they're like shooting their revolvers, and they're like, "Yeah, just fire for effect," just posing this car down, which of course nothing hits them because these are like the stormtroopers in Star Wars. They just
I mean, like I think like a brake light or a back window gets shot out again or something.
I remember that, but yeah, maybe that could be.
Bottom
line is to stop the car at any way.
Yeah. It kept going. This is where the giant chase starts. Like everybody's after him. The Good Old Boys band can't stop their bus, and so they end up driving into a river. It's fun because the guy's like, "Can't we go faster?" And it's like, and then he guns it, and then like they end up like outrunning everybody, and then he can't stop it and drives into a river.
Because no one ever thinks like in movies, like just put it in neutral and turn the key off, like, and then slam the brakes on because it will stop. But that's just me. The guy who knows about that stuff.
Then we cut to Twiggy like waiting at some gas station or somewhere that he said, or motel, waiting for Elwood, and that's the last we see of her. So that's just there randomly. But like you said, apparently put in there as like kind of a trying to get laid with Twiggy.
Yeah, like when I see Dan Aykroyd again at the Crystal Skull stuff, I'll ask him about it.
We got to it's morning. Jake is asleep during all the ruckus as everybody's chasing him and
and all. He's totally out of it.
Elwood has to pull over, and he just comically veers off into like the metal barriers and just runs right through them, and like Indio ends up driving on the hill and stuff like that, and then all the cops are like flying off and wrecking. Not all of them just yet, but just enough, just enough to be funny.
Oh, they completely destroyed over 200 cars in the making of this movie. And I don't think this has the highest body count, but it's pretty high. I more were destroyed in other movies, but this movie, like they wrecked a lot of cars.
But I think also around this, I think one of the things they benefit from, because I think they were like all these cop cars, they were transitioning to a new car, so they just had all these cheap cars that they could get for the
no, these cars were like 7 years out of service. By the time they didn't use Chicago hadn't used the Buick Skylark, which is most of the cars in the movie, since like 72. Like that's when they started getting other cars, and because they actually in 1980 they would have had the square light sealed beam Crown Vics. That would have been the Chicago, more like the Hill Street Blues type police cars. Yeah, they just had all these cars with Chicago police regalia on them that were not in service that they could use for this movie because they were just in the junkyard. Nobody wanted them.
Yeah.
This was after the gas crisis. Well, it was still tail into that, so nobody wanted to buy these cars at auction that got 1 mile to the gallon. Like, nobody wanted this shit. It was just like, it's here for the taking.
And here's where we got the not the announcer, like the dispatcher saying the use of unnecessary violence against the Blues Brother has been approved. And they basically cause all the police to crash.
All the state police.
Yeah, it's just like a massive pile up, like T-boning after T-bone, spinning cars, everything. And then that blocks traffic. So now there's even just parked a line of like 4 wide cop cars parked behind that, and they all get out and just start shooting at the Blues Brothers. Yeah,
in the city, just like
yeah.
firing off guns into a city, like hundreds of guys.
I think it's
Yep.
also like what you're talking about, where they're driving under the L train at like like 120 miles an hour, and
They really did that like 7 times. Now they had the streets blocked off, and it was only one car for the actual like when the poles are just like woo, woo, like they're just a blur. Like there was no stunt driving going on from the sides there.
yeah.
That was just like, oh, we're closing the street and do it. But that's nuts. Because some of those streets are like grids. And I don't know if you've ever driven across metal grids. Like, well, he's like, well, yeah, it's like the Mackinac Bridge up in northern Michigan or whatever. Okay, that's not like driving on cement or concrete. Like those are just metal grids. Your car tracks wildly because you can't get a stable line
Yeah.
because those grids are vibrating so much. You're just tracking like this. That's at 40 miles an hour. Now imagine how frightening that is at like 120. Like your tires are like smoking hot, because I think in this era they're probably still using bias ply tires, which aren't like radial tires. Like it's basically like the tires glued together, whereas tires nowadays are made. You could ask Dad about it; he knows all about that. But it's like, yeah, those tires weren't made to tolerate that kind of heat, running at those speeds, especially over like metal grids and under the L trains and stuff. So yeah, the people that did this were nuts. You've never seen a chase scene like this since, because it was so. I can kind of appreciate the danger of that, because I've driven old shitty cars at incredibly fast speeds in my younger days, and I know how bad those things are. So yeah.
I do remember there was a famous film. It was just a short film of a guy, stunt driver, and he drove through like some part of France, or it might even have been Monaco. I can't remember. He just put a camera on the front of his car.
It was Monaco. I know what you're talking about.
And he just drove the shit out of the stuff. And they did it in the morning so there'd be less people, but like completely illegally. And unfortunately, it's amazing.
And the chase cars that were filming it, they couldn't because they had guys filming it from behind.
No, there's no. I don't think there's any chase car. I think it's just the camera on the front.
Oh, because there was another one they did like that where they had chase cars, but
okay.
because they had to drive, they didn't have permits. They had to drive the car there. They couldn't pull the fuse for the brake lights, so they said, "Hey, no brake lights, motherfucker! You gotta go straight through this." And it's like, oh wow, so no brakes, and we're doing crazy driving, like, and we can't pull the fuses because we don't have a permit. We're not on a closed road. It's like, oh no, this is going to be really hard, but they did it. It's like, yeah, that's dangerous.
And I think they had Charles Leclerc, who's from Monaco, like recreate that thing, but they, of course they, in like a modern car, but then they, of course they blocked off all the track and stuff so you could do that. So
yeah, I mean that's the thing. Like if you can block off the traffic, you can do almost anything.
Yeah.
But not in America, because our infrastructure's so bad. Like, oh, you got to have the roads just right too. Because like, oh, it'd be fun to drive down I-94 at 160 miles an hour in like a Bugatti, even if I get the permits to do it. But like one bump and it's like the car's going to explode. The roads are so bad here that it's like, yeah, they're not designed for those kind of speeds. It's like the road's not. The car is. The road sucks.
Anyway. So now the brothers have evaded the state patrol for now. So now they're being chased by the Nazis, who are shooting at them, like while driving, which the cops weren't doing.
Like old Luger pistols.
Yeah,
like big, long, comically long ones. Yeah.
Here's where they have like the motor's throwing a rod and it's like dumping oil on the windshield, which Jake is comically trying to rub off while like hanging out the car, like. I'd say Ace Ventura style, because that's the probably most famous.
And he's looking
hanging out
through the window. Wow.
Yeah.
And by the way, they're driving on a closed like freeway, like they just pass through, so they don't know what's coming up.
I mean, yeah, very speed. That's the unfinished highway that they end up on. They get to like a highway ramp that's unfinished, so just elevated in there, and there's nothing to connect you to, and the Blues Brothers comically flip their car around. Like it's going one way, then it just kind of like picks up, flips around, and is in the air, driving, flying the other way. Like, yeah, it's more flying than driving mostly. Which is like nothing like this has happened in the movie, so it's just like, well, why not? And then also
God, so
and then also the Nazis' car, they just end up veering off this unfinished highway ramp, which I don't know if you ever driven in Chicago, listeners. There is like going to the United Center, there is like this on ramp and bridge that fucking is like, it goes like, I don't know, like 300 feet high. It's weird. Like it towers
you're
above
driving on it, and then you're like, are we driving into the sky? It's
yeah.
Like, oh, there's the sun, like at the top of this thing. Like, this can't be good.
Yeah, then you just descend upon the city. Anyways, that's essentially what happens here. Is like the Nazi car. Also, the Nazis are all driving station wagons. Don't know what that means, but it's funny.
Yeah, they're driving Ford LTD and Ford Pinto station wagons. And in bright orange, or no, it's like painted like the Nazi red. The small station wagon, the Pinto.
Yeah,
and it had like Nazi sayings on it, or or stickers or something. I don't know. But, yeah, I don't know what that has to do with anything. But it's funny that they're driving station wagons, probably because it's efficient. But they're not driving German cars of that era. I don't know what kind of Nazis they are. Oh, no, they're American Nazis.
Yeah.
They're like
so yeah,
Heinrich Ford.
Yeah. So this orange Nazi station wagon is just comically flying through the air, like through the cityscape. And then they just start falling. Then they cut to basically a part where they just dropped a car from a crane, and they're just watching it fall. And then one of the Nazis,
4 cars from a crane, filming it from different angles.
Okay.
And they had to get crazy permits to do that because the people who were issuing the permits wanted to know about the aerodynamic volatility of the cars because they worried they would get off track and just slam into buildings. So I think the FAA got involved at some point. It's like, how far can this? I don't know if that's true or not, but it's like, how far can this car fall straight down versus like getting caught by the wind and slamming into the Sears Tower or something, which was a real problem for the citizens of Chicago.
So one of the Nazis declares his love for the other before they just become a giant hole in the ground.
It's always funny because always the secret behind Nazism was always like, oh, the homosexuality buried within it. Like, that's always the good way to piss the Nazis off, is to say, well, you guys were all gay, which is another thing they wouldn't do nowadays. It's like that would be seen as a bad thing now. So it's like you can't have that humor, or Illinois Nazis.
So they make it to Daly Plaza. Just as they get out of the car just comically falls apart. Like just the bumper and every piece of trim just falls off.
Yeah, because let me tell you something, kids. If you throw a connecting rod in an engine, like that car is going to stop immediately. It's not going to keep running for any length of time because the crankshaft is connected to the transmission, which the crankshaft will seize and the transmission will stop too. But yeah, it's funny. It's like, oh, it threw a rod. Like, oh, we just got to wipe oil off and we can get another 5 miles out of this thing. It's like, I mean, maybe you could. I don't know. I'm not an expert, but as I understand automotive technology, they don't work that way. That's immediate engine failure and lockup. Because, the things that spin around in the engine, well, one of those has snapped and now comes by the block. And it's on this big crank that's spinning, so that's going to be like bam, bam, bam. That's going to lose a lot of momentum very quickly.
The Blues Brothers take an elevator inside Daly Plaza to the Cook County Assessor's office,
which is cool because there's elevator music playing while they're waiting, and there's this insane amount of action going on in Dealey Plaza. Like there's people, there's a Sherman tank shows up at some point.
Yeah, they also like barricade the door with everything in like the hallway, and and the elevator music is playing. It's like the girl from Ipanema, but it's like that Ipanema or whatever you say, but it's like instrumental or what's that? Is it called music? Oh, is it? Okay.
Yeah, because that was used a lot in Fight Club.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, but a different rendition of it. But yeah.
Oh yeah, I forget what they call it. Is that like Muzak? Is that what they call it?
Yeah.
Called
Elevator
elevator music.
Muzak.
um. There's firemen like axing the way through the door, so even the firemen are after. The National Guard shows up. This is, this is basically like, it's like, oh, like this is essentially, if you ever played Grand Theft Auto, this is like when you create too much chaos, everybody comes for you.
Yeah, they got all 5 stars.
Yep.
At this point.
The brothers sabotage the elevator, which is also funny because it's like Elwood pulls out like, you know, one of those like manual screwdrivers where it's like the whole length will just spin it for you or whatever and stuff like that.
Yeah, it's like a gear drive screwdriver, like the kind of zip, and it just like will turn 100 times when you do that. Yeah.
Which, you know,
like, oh, he's gonna break out tools and cross wires. No, he's just gonna spray hairspray in there like with a lighter, and it's gonna have a huge electrical explosion. Which I don't know, it might. Who knows?
Then they barricade those doors. I thought there was a joke in here where like there's they barricade a door and it was just like, but the doors go the wrong way. But I'm guessing that must be a different movie. That must be like an Austin Powers movie or something. But then they see a note on the door like out to lunch, be back in 15 minutes, and so they just like, you know, politely wait there as everyone's running up the stairs trying to kill them.
Let's not forget the SWAT team. Like in this movie, they're doing like weird stuff because they get out. They're like hut. You know, every move they make is like predicated by that sound.
Yeah, it's basically like, I mean, it's like South Park has done it 100 times. But it's like, is this where it started?
Yeah. I'm familiar with it, but it's like, oh yeah, they do this all the time now.
Yeah, they got helicopters. They're descending from windows to. They have no idea where they are. It's just a thing you do. Here we get a cameo by Steven Spielberg. He's the county assessor.
Yeah, that's really weird. It's like that's Steven Spielberg. That's a 15-year-old Steven Spielberg. I don't know how old he'd be at this. This was post Jaws, so he'd be pretty famous.
I mean, he was a young director, but he'd probably be in his 30s. I mean, a lot of times directors are older, like they don't get their breaks till they're like older. But
yeah, we're still waiting for ours. Like, right.
Well, I say like director, like if you're an actor, it's like you got an age limit, but directors can essentially direct forever as long as they keep making money. So
yeah,
Spielberg still making movies.
Oh yeah.
He's got to be like in his 80s now, right?
Probably. I don't know. I'm just glad Abel Ferrara is still making movies. That's.
I mean, I was at. Sidney Lumet was like making movies into his 90s.
Oh yeah. I mean, what's his name? Scorsese's still making movies. He's got to be.
Yeah.
Upper
yeah, he's got to be. Yeah. Yeah, he just had that new one come out, which looks boring as hell, but interesting. Under the Killing Moon or something like that.
Oh, is that the one with
or Under the Flower Moon or something like that?
I think it's like Killing the Something Moon. Yeah. Because that's got, what's his name in it?
Leonardo DiCaprio.
Yeah, Leonardo DiCaprio.
Killers of the Flower Moon.
Okay. Killers of the Flower. I thought it was Killing the Something Moon. Okay. Don't know anything about it. I'll probably watch it on some streaming service that
I think it's a Netflix movie, so.
Yeah, I don't even watch movies in theaters anymore. It's like in theaters, like, well, no, because I'm already paying a fortune for all these damn streaming services. Can't go spend $20 on a movie ticket.
They get the receipt for paying the orphanage bill as the police and the National Guard, like 80 people in a circle of guns pointed at their head. It's very funny.
Yeah, it's very like Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid ending. Like, oh yeah, it's all these guys have guns. Like if anyone fired any of these guns, they would kill us. And so many people interlaced pointing guns.
Well, I think it might be for the third John Wick movie, but there's the poster for it where it's just a circle of guns pointed at his head. It's like that's essentially what's going on here. So, and then
I heard all those guns like loaded with blanks, but actually capable of firing, like not rubber guns, like they would do now for like say, because those blank guns can kill you at point blank range, as we all know. Those guns were like real, like they could have had blanks in them. They didn't, but we know about John Landis and his like proclivity for safety. So, like, oh yeah, you can see right down the barrel of those guns in that shot if you're paying attention.
And then we cut to this is kind of the credit sequence, but we cut to the Blues Brothers and they're performing from jail. The prisoners are going wild for the performances. They're performing Jailhouse Rock, and the Blues Brothers got arrested, but then also the rest of the band is also there dressed up in prison garb, not knowing, like, are they also arrested? Are they now accessories to the crime? I have no idea.
I'm assuming the Blues Brothers probably were responsible for over $20 million worth of the state of Illinois and Chicago. So these guys are probably in prison for a long time.
Yeah, at least for
20. Kill someone, you can be out in 3 years with good behavior. But if you damage property or steal money from people, you're doing 20 years.
Yeah, I can't remember the beginning premise of Blues Brothers 2000, but presumably by the date, they've been in jail for 20 years.
Oh, okay, yeah, that would make sense. I mean, yeah, that actually would probably. I mean, if you actually did all this stuff and got away with like most of it, like, yeah, you'd be butting up against like a lifetime sentence. Just because the fact that like people would actually get killed, like if 100 police cars got in a wreck, like, oh yeah, somebody get killed. And also if the police are just firing guns wildly about the city, like, the knock-on killings alone, like, you would be held responsible for those in some way.
This performance like kind of like rolls into the credits where like they bring like, it's like Aretha Franklin, and then she's like assisting with the Jailhouse Rock song and like singing a verse with it, and that's how like this credit sequence works, which is kind of interesting. Which I don't know. John Landis also for National Lampoon had interesting stuff where they had like the cut to a character and they give like a little blurb of what happened to them, which I think is the first movie to do that. So yeah, this is kind of a take on that.
Animal House did that.
Yeah. Or what did I say?
National Lampoon.
National Lampoon.
Yeah, because Animal House, I remember like John Belushi's character. It was like, oh, he was a senator later.
Yeah, he became Senator Blutarski or something like that.
Yeah, he had some weird play on his name. But yeah, that was like, makes perfect sense actually.
Yeah, it's just kind of like a fun send off of it's like, hey, you had fun watching this movie, so remember everyone who was in the movie. Here you go. Ray Charles comes back. All those people. So, but yeah. Then that's the end of the movie. So that is Blues Brothers.
Yeah, 2.5 hours of
comedy action.
Kind of a subversive comedy action movie.
Comedy action musical. With characters which actually like they're kind of anti-heroes. Like they're not really likable. You just like the weird situations that they're in.
No, like actually, I said, like Dan Aykroyd is like, oh, he's playing an autistic guy before it was cool, and James Belushi is like I'm doing it now. John Belushi is like is a kind of a sociopath.
Yeah.
It's like, but it's fun because they're like on a mission from God. But they're completely unaware of themselves, the world around them, right and wrong. It's all kind of like, it's all just lost in the mix. Which is like, I don't know if that's a commentary on their characters or just a commentary on the world that exists and how you have to, because ultimately they are trying to do something good, but they're completely psychotic in their execution of that act. It's like it would be better if you just robbed a liquor store.
Yeah.
Get the nun her money because you wouldn't have to like destroy part of Chicago to make this happen.
Yeah, it's like the destruction versus the clean money of the recording contract doesn't weigh in
No,
comparison.
which is what's funny about this movie, because it's two guys like just objective orientated people that have no, they either can't rationalize their own actions, or they just don't bother to do it. I don't know what it is, but it makes for great comedy.
Yeah, yeah.
It explains a lot about the characters and who they are, and why this movie resonated so much with people. And they're also like, they're like two guys that have, like, the blues and all that stuff. Like, that's black culture. These guys totally appropriated it. we didn't talk about it back then, but it's like, oh yeah, this is what they're doing. Because later on, we've always revisited things like Led Zeppelin later. It's like, oh, they stole all this stuff from, and they make these allegations, and it's opinion. I'm not saying one thing's right or wrong, but it's like, oh, it's interesting that, like, now we're talking about, like, oh yeah, a lot of people left a lot of money on the table because other people showed up and claimed this as their own and kind of recreated it as their, like, oh, this is an original act. It's like, it clearly isn't. Like, yeah, but by the
Well,
way,
this movie does have a lot of like performance from black actors and stuff, and they just kind of like you said, the Blues Brothers stand aside when that happens. It's like, well, we'll give you the floor, and then we'll come back in and do our movie.
That's why this movie was ahead of its time, because it acknowledged, like, everything that's cool about us came from these people, but yet we still have to, like, move through the world that is unjust and do something good for orphans. We're going to pay $5,000 worth of property taxes to a corrupt system and cost it $20 million. And that's how we revolt against the system and win. But really, the Blues Brothers isn't about blues. It's about punk rock. As far as philosophically, right? I'm just trying to mix Verhoeven bullshit in with this.
Yeah.
I don't believe that, but it's like, yeah, you could say that. You could make that argument.
But I guess because I never like really watched a whole lot of I guess he clips of it, of the original Saturday Night Live cast. So I guess I didn't realize that it was part of Saturday Night Live. So I don't even know like what the skit was, or if it was just something that happened.
Well, no, I mean there was like 5 original ones and like 2 additional ones with the Blues Brothers. There was like the original Aykroyd Belushi Blues Brothers. I think they did like 5 with different guests where they would come on and do music. Because a lot of the people that were, some of the musicians were like also the Saturday Night Live musicians too.
Oh, okay, that makes sense.
That's where they got a lot of these guys. And then later on, when they tried to relaunch, I think they did one in '98 with someone, and then they did one with Dan Aykroyd and Justin Timberlake in like 2000 something, and that was like the last time the Blues Brothers thing was brought up. But yeah, there was kind of like, oh, we're going to do this performance, and we're kind of these kooky guys. And then it evolved from a Saturday Night Live skit into a movie.
Huh,
But
okay.
in this case, the movie was more famous than the Saturday Night Live thing. Like, you'd have to know like old Saturday Night Live to really appreciate
So it wasn't necessarily like a setup as a skit. It was more like, because the thing about Saturday Night Live, they'd always have like a musical performance as they're like adjusting to a new skit or whatever. So
yeah,
they would just
like,
encroach on the. They would just encroach on the musical performance.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. But it was a very like stiff performance by Dan Aykroyd because it was funny, because he was kind of doing that. And then John Belushi was just a lunatic who, like, I just did a mountain of cocaine. He knew after a mountain of cocaine, which is fine. I no judgment here. But yeah. So it kind of evolved into its own animal.
Okay.
And interestingly, talking about like 2 white guys being the Blues Brothers and all this, is like there was some real racism around the release of this movie, because certain theater magnates who owned a lot of theaters didn't want to run this movie because they literally said, we don't want a bunch of black people in our theaters, because we know what this movie is, we know who the main characters are, but we know there's a lot of black supporting and cameo actors in this, and we don't want our theaters having a bunch of black people in it. and they wouldn't run the movie. I'm serious. I'm not making
Yeah.
it
Oh
up.
yeah. That seems that's people.
This is 1980 though, not 1960. It's 1980 we're talking about. So it's kind of funny, like the kind of racism.
Sometimes in the South it's 1960s everywhere.
This was in the Midwest. What I'm talking about.
Okay.
It's for the guy's own. I'm not going to name names, so I don't want to get sued. But you can look it up, people. If you're curious, go to the Blues Brothers Wikipedia page and look at like the initial run of this movie. It's like even though it was well reviewed, it didn't get as wide a release as it would have. Certain theater owners didn't want to run the movie because they're worried black people would show up to the theaters. I'm not making that up. I'm quoting that verbatim. So yeah.
I did not look up the box office, but I assume it was a success.
It was a success. I think it made $112 million.
Okay.
Let me go to what's my box office? There's different numbers you can look. Okay, it costs like roughly $35 million to make with advertising, and it made $115 million.
Okay.
I don't know how much of that is theater versus like video sales later, because I know this movie is like the ultimate like cult classic movie, and I knew guys growing up that were really into this movie. Like I said, I'm not a blues guy. I'm more of a 70s prog rock. I'm more of a Jethro Tull, Pink Floyd guy. So this wasn't my genre of music, but I thought the movie was cool. And so I appreciate that, but I don't know anything about the music portrayed in it, or, I'm not, it's not my wheelhouse, but I appreciate it.
It's a good soundtrack. So yeah.
Yeah. I mean, these are all cool. I mean, John Lee Hooker's cool no matter what. His name is cool. I wish I had a name like John Lee. If I made like exhaust manifolds for cars, and my name, because there's like people that do that, it's called Hooker Headers. It's like that would be cool also. Like that name's always cool if it's not your profession.
Would you say this is your favorite John Landis movie?
Yes. Oh yeah, easily.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, I like the weirdness of American Werewolf in London, but it also, the ending of that movie is so abrupt and sad, I really can't get into it. And also, John Landis is from Chicago, I believe. So this is kind of love letter Chicago. Too.
Well, yeah, because like all those Saturday Night Live guys
the only big city I have any relationship with.
Yeah. Well, because like almost all of the Saturday Night guys people came out of Second City, the Second City comedy troupe. And that's Chicago. Chicago is the second city, which is named that for being the second biggest city at least it was in America.
Yeah, it is.
And now it's not. It's got to be
third.
Is it, or does Texas have something that's bigger now?
No, I always thought it was New York, Los Angeles, but Los Angeles cheats because it's actually way bigger than you think.
Yeah, it's basically a state unto itself.
Yeah, Los Angeles is like, it's bigger than New York and Chicago put together, but because Los Angeles is literally like 25 million people, but it's not, because it's just the suburbs around LA. So yeah, because like New York is 10 million. Or it was, I don't know what it is now. Chicago's like 5 million, and then LA's was 3 million or whatever. But really, LA is like mega city one. New York is like just the old world, and Chicago is stuck in the middle somewhere. Chicago is our capital because we're in the Midwest, and that's the place we know and we go.
That's where you have to go, because the bands won't play in your shithole town that you live in. So we gotta go to Chicago.
Like Conlon wants to move to Milwaukee because it's Cedar Rapids with amenities.
No, Minnesota.
Or Minnesota, yeah. What's the city you want to move to?
Minneapolis.
Oh, Minneapolis. Oh, I thought it was Milwaukee. Okay.
Milwaukee's Wisconsin, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. No one wants to live there.
Is it cold there?
It's cold in Wisconsin and Minnesota. So.
Well, I mean, it's cold in Michigan too, but the cold places you can move to in Michigan are like abandoned. You have to provide all your own utilities and stuff. Because I will retire, and when I say retire, it's not like 20 years down the road. It's like 10 years down the road. I'm going to move to northern Michigan. I know everyone tells me not to because it's like, well, if you have a heart attack, it's 10 hours to the nearest hospital. It's like, well, how about if I don't have a heart attack? How about if I'm optimistic? Because I
Well,
literally moved someplace where the temperature is like the high is 80 for the whole year.
Well, the thing in Minneapolis is like it's roughly like Cedar Rapids and Minneapolis are like roughly the same population and roughly the same expense, but Minneapolis gets way more cool stuff there. But that's also helping by being the Twin Cities, where it's like, well, you got another city next to it that's basically as big as Minneapolis, so it's kind of structured in a way that it's a way bigger city than it lets on. So,
but Conlon, if you're willing to be patient, see, that's only the Twin Cities. You've got the quads.
yeah, I got the quads.
That's 2 twins. You just got to wait 20 years for the population to grow by 100 million or whatever, and then you'll be fine. 9 Inch Nails will play in Cedar Rapids.
Although Davenport does have an IMAX theater, so yeah, there's that going for it.
We had like 4 of those around here, and they all went broke. So
we had one here, but we had the weird one where it was broadcast on a dome, which is cool if you're watching nature documentaries that are exclusively like filmed in IMAX format. But when you go there and watch like a movie that's widescreen and not using the full length of the format, and there's just like this weird projection where the corners are all distorted weirdly, and then there's just these weird black ovals on the dome. Like that was the worst way to watch like a narrative movie, IMAX movie.
we had competing IMAX here. Because we had IMAX with goofy goggles.
Okay.
It wasn't real IMAX, but it was like, well, it was goofy goggles IMAX. That's what we watched. Tron, the latest Tron movie.
Legacy.
Saw that. Yeah, whatever that was, terrible. But we watched it.
Cool music. It's the best music video movie.
It's like, yeah, Daft Punk did the soundtrack or something like that.
Yeah.
So it was cool, and it was the guy who played Tony Blair in every movie was the bad guy. And then we had like real IMAX on the other side of town, which like that looked cool. Like I saw one of the Matrix movies, the last one, I think, in that IMAX. But then that place like went out of business. Like you just couldn't go there anymore. And then Goofy Goggles IMAX went away, and now we have no IMAX. But we can watch like Bollywood movies, like the multiplex we had with like the one right near my house that has like 35 screens. Like you can watch new movies there, or you can watch Bollywood movies there. Like you can, and on huge screens. And if you want to watch a 7-hour Bollywood movie where people sing in a language you don't understand, it's like, well, they seem to be having fun, and the tickets are $7. Like, okay, cool. And those places are packed. I've never seen so many Lexuses parked side by side in a parking lot. And then you've got the State Theater downtown, which like they're gonna do, which that's like the old movie theater in downtown Ann Arbor, but they were gonna do like a Russian sci-fi retrospective where you can watch like Stalker and all those movies on a big screen. I was thinking about going, but then COVID happened, and I don't know what they're doing anymore, because it's like, oh, I'll go do that because I can get an Uber from my house to the theater and back, because they serve liquor at the State Theater. And if I'm doing like 10 hours of Russian sci-fi cinema, I'm getting hammered because that makes sense. But,
yeah, I live like a few blocks away from probably the biggest theater in Cedar Rapids, and there's a time like they fixed it up now a little bit, but like, man, it was like they had the theaters were fine. They have like the the reclinable seats and stuff like that, but you walk in the bathroom and just everything is broken. Just all the hand soap things are just ripped off the wall.
It makes you wonder who's doing that.
Yeah, and it's just like you come back there next month, it's the same things ripped off the wall. It's like, it's like, should I be coming here with tools to fix this? Like, it's got to be a community effort.
Oh yeah, I love those things. Like when you walk into the bathroom, it's like, should I just piss on the floor? I mean, what am I doing here? Yeah.
But I was trying to think of ways like how could you turn this around. I was trying to think of like you should have like food trucks out, have because you're showing like the Bollywood movies here too, and just have food trucks out and then make a whole thing out of it. Then I realized like, oh, that's where they make their money is selling you $8 popcorn that costs 3 cents to make. So it's like they're not making movies off selling the tickets. So it's like, no, you can't have fun projecting movies.
Oh, I remember when me and Grayson would go to like he'll never forget the movies I took him to from the ages of like 12 to 20 or like 19 or whenever he went to college, when he kind of was out of our lives. It's like, yeah, we'd go watch like indie movies at this one theater in Royal Oak where they serve you beer and stuff, like, but it was almost like bar prices. It wasn't like the crazy prices. It's like, no, we want you to get drunk here and enjoy the movie. And it's like, once he was 16, it's like, well, you can drive my car, so we're gonna go watch some movie about like lighthouse keepers or whatever I want to see, at the Royal Oak theaters. And it's like we're the youngest people like I'm the youngest guy in the theater by like 30 years, and he's the youngest guy by like 40 years. Like it's just a bunch of old people, and we're all drinking beer in these theaters that are like if like there's my favorite was they put what was that sound? They put like an Atmos sound system, which I don't know if you know what that is. That's like
Dolby Atmos, yeah.
Yeah. They put an Atmos sound system in a theater that was like really old, and when like it had this amazing like sound structure to it where it would project sound at you. It was cool, but like the roof tiles would fall because they did that. They like, but we're putting the Atmos system in, but we're not updating any of the other stuff. It's like, whoa! It's like the scene would happen, and then a tile would drop. Like, oh wow! Because I think we went and saw it's like Grayson said, like his favorite memory from childhood is like seeing Annihilation in theaters with Dad. There's like all these wild scenes in that movie, and yeah, a tile fell from the ceiling during one of the like intense scenes where the bear mutant thing came into the cabin. Yeah. And it was like screaming like, help me. And this tile fell from the ceiling, and everyone in the theater was like, whoa. It was like, oh, this is interacting with us live. And
fourth dimensional filmmaking.
Yeah, it's like, oh yeah, I'm never gonna forget that. It's like, yeah, take your friends to this movie. The Annihilation kids in high school, which didn't exist, but it was fun.
Odds on them making a remake of Blues Brothers?
0%.
Okay.
I mean, this was a movie made about a dying art form. The art form was that. This movie, they were talking about disco replacing this.
Yeah.
That's how antiquated this was.
Yeah, the early 80s, late 70s was the death of disco. So
yeah.
Because
remake of this, and that's a terrible idea.
Well, you just know like so many movie studios are risk averse, so it's like, well, what IP haven't we recycled yet? But yeah, like you said, they're not currently making. Well, I don't know have they ever rebooted any of the like Saturday Night Live movie verse?
No, they don't even make Saturday Night Live movies anymore because the quality got so bad. Like the ragged end of that was like the worst like cancer patient death you could imagine of the last generation of.
Well, there were good ones that they weren't successful, but you had like the Lonely Island guys. So you had like MacGruber, which is basically like a cult film now, but it wasn't well received when it came out.
Yeah.
But it was a good movie. It's a crazy movie.
Oh yeah, I remember.
Your MacGyver spoof movie.
It was funny.
And then you had like the Pop Star with the Lonely Island guy. What's his name? Andy Samberg.
Yeah.
Which that was SNL adjacent, but that wasn't necessarily an SNL character. that was a really good spoof movie, and then like it just kind of like never made any money. And they also did Hot Rod, which again was just adjacent. It wasn't a Saturday Night Live
I don't
movie.
remember that one. Yeah, I don't know.
Hot Rod's great. Like
Oh,
people,
okay.
it's a really undersold comedy because it's got like, it's got the guy from what's that? Not Downton Abbey. What's the HBO comedy about the guy who's the pitcher, the minor league pitcher?
Oh, Eastbound and Down.
Yeah, that guy. That was like one of his first movies.
Danny
First big,
McBride.
yeah, Danny McBride's in it.
Oh
like
yeah, I love that guy. He's hilarious. Had a great performance in was it Alien Covenant?
Yeah,
It was so crazy to see that because I only thought of him as Danny McBride,
yeah.
and then he was in Alien Covenant, and he like looked exactly the same, but he was like, "Oh, we're doing this straight." It's like, and that was a really dark like action movie,
Yeah.
and it ended on a really dark note, but it was like
that whole movie's upsetting.
that's a good movie. It's it's I enjoy.
It's now I'm forgetting his name. Well, the Scott brothers, Ridley Scott. So of course it's A+ production. It's just some of the content is like I can't get into this.
Oh, but it was such a recovery from the one before
Prometheus.
It. Yeah, because I remember I took days off work. It's like, oh, Prometheus is coming out. Idris Elba's in it, who's one of my favorite actors because from like Luther and stuff like that. It's like, this is gonna be amazing. And I was like, oh, I had to like drink after I watched it. Like I can't and didn't we not talk about Prometheus deliberately for a year because it's like I can't deal with it emotionally. It was so fucked up. It was like, god damn, and I took days off work for it.
Well, it had such a hype, and then like we always talk about like it's like a great half a movie.
Yeah, best half a movie ever done.
Which it's kind of a bread and butter for this podcast. We'll get to it at some point. It's just like, but yeah, we're like, nah, we can't do it. I'm still disappointed. I mean, there's been like a. I mean, everybody hates the same things that we hate, but there's been a thing where kind of like a resurgence for it, where it's like people are like, no, like you're missing the point. It's like, no, that the bad lady can't laterally move and gets squashed by the thing. Like, no, it's like that's what she's deserved. It's not stupid. It's like, okay, whatever.
Alien is not the alien universe is not about karmic justice, no matter how much you want to make it. It's about not becoming a part of the life cycle of these horrible creatures. That's what the alien movies are about.
I mean, my simplistic, like, what I don't like about Prometheus is like, and why I like the first half is like, you're sending the smartest people in the world to go die a Friday the 13th death in a horror movie.
Yeah, it's stupid. That's why I think like Alien Covenant is great. It's just because of the stupidity of the movie before it. And the fact that you have like, these amazing actors in this terrible, it just sucked. Alien 3 was better than Prometheus, like way better, like
yeah,
millions of times better. And it's why I didn't take time off work.
And that
Blade Runner 2049. It's like that was the next movie. Like, okay, you're gonna get me to take time off.
And Alien 3 had a way harder follow up than Prometheus did.
Oh yeah.
Aliens 2, one of the greatest action movies ever. What are you going to do next? We're going to do a boring, self-reflective alien prison movie.
Which was kind of cool at the end of
Yeah. Oh yeah, because I mean, as a kid, I hated Alien 3, but I hated Alien 3 because I loved Aliens, so that was pretty much the whole thing. So
yeah, I've viewed Alien 3 again and again, and it's like, oh, okay, I kind of like this now. I'd like every movie for a different reason, but Alien was one of my favorite movies. And I still say, like, when people are like, what's the best movie of the Alien franchise? It's like, oh, Alien.
Yeah.
By far the best. I mean, you can't beat it. it's it's because it's a small universe. It's a very small world, and the problem is like in in Aliens it gets bigger, and in Alien 3 it gets bigger and darker. Um, and it's and then the Alien Resurrection, and that's just
It
weird.
gets funnier.
Yeah, it's like cool because I like French stuff. It's like anything the French do, it's like I'm gonna give it a pass because I like French stuff.
Yeah, I like Alien Resurrection. It's not really an alien movie. It's almost like a subversive. We made a comedy out of an alien movie, but it's different and weird. So yeah, I like it. Some people just wholesale hate it. I mean, there's like, hey, it is weird to have like a late '90s movie. It's like, why are we having Ripley, a clone of Ripley, playing basketball and making a no look backhand shot? That's stupid, but that's the movie.
Yeah, the whole movie is a no look 3-pointer. It's like that's the whole thing. But then again, when it comes to French stuff, I'm like super forgiving. It's like, oh well, it's French. Hold on.
I mean, had a guy use his own death with the chest burster to headshot another evil guy. It's like, that's great.
Yeah, that's cool. Like, hey, if you're gonna die and it's gonna suck anyway, you might as well make it count. Fuck these people.
Hey, it's Blues Brothers.
Yeah.
Okay, it's on
no
Amazon.
Chest bursters and no chest bursters and blue.
I was gonna say, if you like her, oh yeah, we're sending a probe to space containing the supercut of the of scenes from the imperfect collection that is the Verhoeven Effect. Nathan, what movie are we sending to the space for the supercut from Blues Brothers?
Oh, it's the scene for the hotel. Just or they what is it? The hot. What's the place called where he lives?
Hotel for Transient Men.
Yeah, where it gets blown up and these guys just step out of the rubble, brush their clothes off, and like, yeah, we're on a mission from God. Who dies? We're like crusaders, modern day crusaders.
So if you like what you heard, and how can if you can find us at verhoeveneffect.com. You can what other platform of your choice, you can rate our podcast. You can rate us whatever you want, but the only thing the algorithm listens to is the highest rating. Remember, you control the algorithm doesn't control you. We have listener support at verhoeveneffect.com, where you can support us at a monthly stipend of either 99 cents, $4.99, or $9.99. You can find us at Twitter at Verhoeven Effect. You can find us at Facebook at Verhoeven Effect. You can find us on YouTube at American Greed Factory. You can watch both this and that show live and unedited. And we also have t-shirts at belowthecollar.com/Greed Factory.
And get those, because I just got one. I'm actually going to wear a shirt from my own podcast.
They're flying off the shelf.
Yeah, they are. I'm like the second person to buy one.
And here's 001. So for the Verhoeven Effect podcast, I'm Colin.
And I'm Nathan.
Goodbye, America.